I'll call the meeting, I'm going to put my glasses on, of the Foster Planning Board of the 20th to order, March 20th to order. Before we start, if everybody, for the secretary, could please print their name, everybody that's here, please print your name so she has a record of who's here.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Just the people who want to speak.
Just the people, no, everybody in the room,
No, we
please.
like to know, who's here.
And last time, anybody that wants to speak, please sign on the top of the page. Thank you.
Moving four chairs.
Well, there's some seats right there. I did try and get the townhouse, I was refused.
No, go ahead. It wouldn't be the first time. Everybody does.
All right, may I have a roll call, please, Madam Secretary?
Yeah. Vice Chair Joseph Carey, are you here?
Here.
Mike Carpenter, are you here?
Here.
Lisa Thompson, are you here? Here.
Please.
Anthony Renzi,
Here.
Josh Sheldon,
Here.
Chair Ron Servacio. Also present is Joanna Kelly, solicitor, Jennifer Siciliano, planner, Carol Monteith, say it again. Barbara, Carol Monteith, Barbara Monteith, stenographer, pardon me, and many people who are in the here in the building with us and who are hopefully putting their names on the sheet that's being passed around.
All right, we have no minutes tonight, there was a little foul up, so there will be no minutes to approve. Correspondence, at this point I have none, does anybody want to pass anything in?
I'm
Yes,
so
ma'am.
sorry. Since they're not available, do you want to have somebody move to table them?
Sure. May I have a motion to table, please?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. Any discussion?
No, don't have.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 6-0. All right, correspondence? None. So we're going to move right to a major land development preliminary. Gee, we're going to start, excuse me, with Joe Carey's going to give us some brief information on a 5-year road plan, so for the new people know what we're talking about. And next time, I've asked the highway director to come in and present his plan. Joe?
All right, as some of you may know, the planning board is supposed to review a 5-year road and bridge plan every year with the highway director. Last year we didn't do it because we changed directors during the year, and the director that was replaced, the old one was kind of new, so we skipped over it. I think if Bob's been in for a while, it'd be good for him to go over the last plan that was on record and, bring it up to date, and then he can see us and discuss it with us, so make sure the budget's there to get our road moving. So basically what we do is get a list of all the roads and bridges and which roads are most in need of repair, so the priority for every road and bridge in town. So we can get the funds from our capital or through grants to get the stuff done, so. If everybody's on board, I'd like to have Bob come in maybe at a, when he has time to review it, and, Jennifer send that over to him, and have him revise the last plan from a couple of years ago that was done by Bob Martin, I believe, or Joe. I think Joe, but we'll have that revised, he can go over, because he's done some work over the last year, so he knows that some pages been going on, so.
Oh, Joe, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to-
Go ahead.
No. Why do you think that we quit following the 5-year road plan?
I think it's a lot to do with the turnover of the DPW directors over the years. Has a lot to do with it. Different people come in and I think they have different ideas of what's priority. Also, there's a lack of funding to get through the paving. We don't get the money into our paving account every year, so they're limited to what they can accomplish. So I think that's a big problem.
All right. So, any questions for Joe? All right, so Joe, I've already made arrangements with the highway director for the April, for the first meeting in April, all right, for the workshop. All right, moving on. Major land subdivision preliminary plan. Before I start, I'd like to read the planning board hearing procedure. Any persons who wishes to speak will sign in with his name and address and be placed under oath. All questions and statements must be addressed to the board. There will be no crosstalk in the audience. Once the application is read, the chair will hear from the applicant first. It is the applicant's burden to present evidence supporting his or her request. The presentation must be clear and to the point. After the applicant has completed his or her presentation, the board may ask any questions to their satisfaction. The hearing will be open to the public. The first people that will be able to speak are the abutters, right? And all the abutters will speak. I have a list of the abutters here. You must be on this list to speak first. After that, only people from Foster may speak next, and I will hold you to 2-minute limit. And then after that, if there's anybody else that would like to make a comment, I'll be glad to listen. The chair will then accept, once all testimony is heard by the board will close the meeting and comment and wrap up the discussion. The chair will then accept a motion to approve the application along with the required findings of facts and conditions. The board reserves the right to postpone the decision until the next regularly scheduled hearing. Should I read this down, this part?
Yes, please.
Okay, so here, preliminary plan, public hearing for the applicant Hartford Solar LLC, also known as Cohog Solar LLC, to construct a 6.02 megawatt DC, in parentheses, 4.68 megawatt AC, ground-mounted solar installation encompassing approximately 20.5 acres. Acres separated into two arrayed areas. The related access drive and gate soil erosion and sediment control measures with stormwater drainage best management practices and electric service extension and structures located on Hartford Pike between utility poles 3 and 12, across from the intersection with Tucker Hollow on 45.34 acres, being Plat 18, Lot 30, in an agricultural residential district. All right. So, we're all set. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Jeff Caffrey. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Resnick and Caffrey. I'm here on behalf of the applicant while my partner's in Florida enjoying the sunshine. With me this evening, I have, yes. Yes. So with me this evening, I have Joe Casali and Dan DeSeris from Joseph Casali Engineering. I also have Peter Dubrow, Director of Project and Engineering from Sunbelt General Capital, and Diane Sula, Landscape Architect with Diane Sula Associates. They will all be presenting some testimony this evening. I don't know if you want to swear them in advance or when they're called. It's a pleasure.
I'm sorry, I missed that. I was counting.
He wants to swear them in advance. So that
Yes, please. Swear them in advance.
You want me to swear?
But I'm I'm gonna do each one individually.
All right.
So it's just, it's easier to
All right.
get it all at one time. Do you wanna wait, do you wanna do it now, or do you wanna wait?
Let's do it now so we don't break
Okay.
up.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Can you state your name for the record?
Diane Soul. Spell your last name?
S-O-U-L-E.
You solemnly-
Are any of these experts, do you want to qualify them now?
Yes, actually, they'll all be testifying as experts. I believe they will testify in front of this board as well before. Mr. Casali, Mr. Dubrow testified in previous planning board hearings. I don't know if Ms. Sewell has testified in
I
before or
don't
not.
think she
Okay. Would you like me to run here?
Please.
Okay. Diane, could you please explain to the board what your present occupation is?
Yeah, I'm a registered landscape architect in Rhode Island. I was registered back in '86 and have been practicing as a landscape architect for a little over 40 years.
During your 40 years, have you had occasion to testify in front of boards, and
Yes, I have.
have you been qualified as an expert previously?
Yes, I have.
Do you also testify in court proceedings?
I have not done that.
Okay, but certainly as far as administrative hearings?
Yes.
Okay, no further questions, a motion to recognize Ms. Sewell as an expert in the area of landscape architect.
Do I need a motion?
Yeah.
All right, may I have a motion to accept her as an expert witness? May I have a second? All those, discussion, all those in favor? Opposed, abstentions, there you go, 6-0.
Thank you. Did you want to swear in that you remain?
Yes.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Please state your full name.
Joe Casali, C-A-S-A-L-I, registered professional engineer, offices at 300 Post Road in Warren.
Mr. Casali has only been qualified as an
Yes.
expert, so the board is fine.
Yes.
Who else?
Tina, you're going to be testifying now? Okay, then just Peter.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God? Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
Peter Dubrow, D-U-B-R-O.
Thank you.
Mr. Dubrow is also testifying in that
Yes.
capacity.
Again, he has, yes, thank you.
Okay. So before we get into the formal presentation, I just wanted to highlight some of the things that have been done to date, give you a little bit of the background of our presentation. As most of you know, we started this process back in December of 2017 with the pre-application meeting. Since that date, we've had opportunity to do some site visits. We've done a site visit for the public and for the planning board on February 3rd, and then a subsequent site visit with the planning board again on February 6th. We've also had informational meetings with the neighbors to try and address as many concerns as we could of the general public. As you probably are aware, on May 2nd, we had a master plan hearing for which we received master plan approval on a 6-to-1 vote. Subsequent to the master plan, we went to the zoning board. The zoning board first requested a site visit, which took place on June the 11th. And then on June 13th, the zoning board granted us a special use permit allowing for the development of the site for major solar installation. With respect to the May 2nd master plan decision, it was determined by this board as part of their written decision. Excuse me if I read from the decision, but I want it to be entered as part of the record and for part of the public to be aware of. As part of the decision was entered, it says the planning board further finds that proposed development subject to the conditions imposed minimizes flooding and soil erosion. That's already been determined by this board. Provides for safe circulation, adequate surface water runoff, and suitable building sites. Also, it will cause no significant negative environmental impacts. We're already vested with this decision, and these matters have already been decided by the board. I know that some of you this evening were going to have some concerns regarding those issues, but please note that that matter has already been finally determined by the board. Another finding that the board made is that it's consistent with the comprehensive community plan and has satisfactorily addressed the issues with our inconsistencies in accordance with Rhode Island law. So having said that, the board did impose several conditions upon the approval that they granted us, and the purpose of the preliminary plan meeting this evening is for us to address those concerns to the satisfaction of the board, and also to address any additional questions that you members of the public may have. To that end, I'm going to ask Joe Casali to come up and do his presentation, and certainly if the board has any questions, feel free to ask them.
Can we ask them any questions?
Once we're done with our presentation, I think the board will open it up for questioning.
I'll open it up when they're done.
But technically, your questions need to be directed at the board. The questions are not directed to the applicant themselves, and the board can then ask the questions if they
How good is
choose.
that?
Excuse
That's
me?
the procedure for public hearing.
It's still no damn good.
Excuse me.
Can I ask, can we reorient the screen slightly so that people in the back can see the presentation?
The presentation,
I
It's for the
understand
board,
that the
okay,
presentation
so-
is for the board, but there are a lot of people who are here who, I think it's
if you can move it back towards the wall, but the board must be able to see it.
yeah, I think if we re-angle it, the board can still see it.
You probably noticed how full that on the record.
Right. There you go. Go on.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just for the record, my name is John Casari. I'm a registered professional engineer with offices at 300 Post Road in Warwick. While some of you may have seen the initial portion of this, Mr. Chairman, I just want to take a step back, reintroduce the project to everybody, go through all of the permits we've procured since we've seen you last at master plan, and also, one by one, we want to address, we're in receipt of staff comments. We believe that we've addressed all of them and just like to go through them. So in respect to the location, that's the Situate-Foster town line and Route 101 Hartford Pike that you all know. Tucker Hollow Road to the south, and that's the actual piece. Specifically, Assessors Plat 18, Lot 30. As discussed, it's a 45-acre piece entirely in your AR or your agricultural residential zone. When you look closer at it, the orange inlay that just came up, that's the building envelope. So we cannot go anywhere outside of that envelope with any of the solar panels or appurtenances. As we discussed before, we had the wetlands delineated on the site back in 2016 by Scott Rabideau of Natural Resource Services in Farrville. There's various wetland complexes to the east and the west and the south of the site. And I'll get into the topography and the drainage design a little bit later, why the water breaks in such a direction on this site. What has just come up is those are the DEM jurisdictional buffers that exist with these wetlands. All of them are swamps that are greater than 3 acres in area, so DEM puts on an additional regulatory buffer called the 50-foot perimeter wetland. You'll see that all of our work is outside all of those jurisdictional buffers, which is why we've received our permit from DEM. But our proposal, Mr. Chairman, is a major solar installation by your zoning code. It takes up close to 20 acres, what you see there, and that's roughly about 2,250 panels. Complete with this is an initial access road. And that also has a hammerhead turnaround as requested by this board for fire personnel. That road's about 1,200 linear feet. It's a stone road that will be there permanently for our maintenance as well as fire apparatus and emergency response. And it's basically made up of crushed stone. That is the physical alteration permit from the Department of Transportation that was in your packet. We had to seek a permit from DOT because we're working in the state right-of-way. They're also concerned with flooding and drainage to the state highway as well as access. So that's the permission from the DOT to do what we need to do on the respective site. So in terms of drainage, you can see the topography that has come up. And high points really exist along this ridge. Some of this water goes to the rear of the site, but most of it goes to where any of the respective wetlands are. So it makes perfect sense to me as an engineer that the wetlands are in the low-lying areas, and that's where all the stormwater is. Ultimately, as we had shown at master plan, when the water leaves the site, specifically in this westernmost wetland, it passes under an 18-inch concrete pipe and ultimately makes its way to another freshwater wetland before confluencing with the Dolly Cole Brook. Similarly, there's a small wetland on the eastern portion of the site. This is where we always would meet if you've ever been on any of those site walks. This water makes its way and passes through another 18-inch pipe, again, ultimately into that same wetland. And then lastly, that northeasterly-most wetland, again, into the Dolly Cole Brook, but the way it confluences around. So it's why we've taken and put our drainage appurtenances in those 4 low points. So the basis of design is for us to capture any increase in runoff and be able to route it through those ponds so that we can meet the town code of attenuating any increase in runoff. We've also, because of the good soil characteristics on this site, we've able to go one step higher, and we're able to reduce drainage in terms of volume for every storm event in each one of those ponds, which is why we received our DEM permit. That is the recorded DEM permit. It was the insignificant alteration permit that we were required to get because we're disturbing more than an acre of land, and also because we're discharging our drainage into regulated freshwater wetlands. In terms of the physical appurtenances, there was, of course, we're cognizant of our closest direct abutter. And initially, we had our drainage appurtenance about 122 feet from the property line. We heard the concerns at a neighborhood meeting we had. We were able to then move that to 202 feet from the property line. That was the master plan approval. Through the design, we were able to move this even further so that we can comfortably say that the drainage appurtenance is going to be at least 225, 230 feet from the property line. And when I look at it topographically, you can see that all of our water will be channeled into the pond, and then as that pond releases, everything sort of bypasses this property into those wetlands under that 18-inch pipe and into the brook we spoke of. There are other things, Mr. Chairman, that accompany this solar, this major solar installation. We all need a transformer for these type of operations, which is why there is our transformer and utility pad location. That goes in by underground electric to what we call a disconnect pole and ultimately into a metering pole. The entire site is going to have at least the town code of the 20-foot vegetative buffer, though we far exceed that in every location. I do have the landscape plan. There were some questions at both the master plan and zoning. So Diane Soul is with me tonight. Some of you may or may not know her. Diane is a local landscape architect that I have been working for over 25 years. A great fit for this type of project. One of the items in the staff report was that you had wanted an updated landscape budget, and we actually put the seating in there. So this budget is over $170 some odd thousand. I hope you all remember that we agreed to and still agree to bond this. So we will put up a performance bond of $175,000 so that if we don't do everything we're saying we're going to do, you have a financial instrument. You have a vehicle that you can cash that bond and do it yourself. It is odd, I don't want to say odd, it is different, but it's another belt and suspenders. We heard the concerns of the community. We think it's a fair solution. We've showed you these pictures of what this will look like, that you will be able, without landscaping, to see some of those panels And with all of that landscaping buffer that Diane proposed, we want that to be completely blocked out from 101. Same if we're taking a picture from our closest abutter, what one would expect to see without landscaping and what one can expect to now see with the landscape buffer. Just to wrap up, Mr. Chairman, in terms of permitting, it has been a long road. We had a pre-application meeting with this board in December of 17. We did a couple of site walks in January and February of 18. We had an abutter meeting in April of 18, and we now finally had our master plan approval in May of 18. We had a couple of site walks with zoning in June, and then was granted our special use permit later that month in June. That is the actual, the special use permit that was recorded in the land evidence records. We've also obtained our DEM permit since we've seen you last, as well as our DOT permit. And we're here tonight before you for our preliminary plan approval. But to address some of the comments specifically for staff, we understand that they want a notification of intent or saw cut to be filed with DEM. We ran out of time today. We are planning on filing that within the next couple of days. It's basically before we start cutting, we need to notify the Division of Forestry 5 days in advance. We're going to do this Friday well in advance of any planned cutting. There was talk about our certificate of insurance, our liability insurance, which we have provided. There was also questions about if the stone walls, if consideration was given to Rhode Island, the Historic Preservation Commission. Part of our DOT PAP permit, one of the subcommittees that looks at all PAPs is historic. So this was the letter that they sent back to the DOT approving our permit. We wanted to present that to you. And Jen, we do have copies. The liability insurance hasn't been presented, nor has the saw cut, and we have copies for everybody, and we can provide that. Lastly is the interconnection service agreement, which you can see is signed and executed by the CEO, Mr. Dabari, who is not here tonight. And the last two elements that I'd like to have Peter speak to, because he's got a deeper understanding, is what we're going to do in terms of educating the local emergency personnel, and also there was questions on the estimate for our decommissioning plan. And then I will just finish up quickly. So Peter, may I ask if you will introduce yourself and speak to both the emergency plan as well as decommissioning?
Yes, hello, I'm Peter DeBroy, I work for Sunlight General Capital. I also am employed by Tahoe Solar on this project. We have on many occasions provided safety training for first responders on these types of projects. In general, the biggest, largest number of projects we do this on are school rooftops, because everyone's concerned about the well-being of the children, and in the event of a fire, that the firefighters are able to quickly come in and address the extra solar component. In a situation such as this, where we have a open field with solar in it, there is not a great concern because the number of flammable materials is fairly low, the grass itself being the main component of any fire. The solar panels are constructed of glass and metal, and the racking components are also made of steel, so there's not a whole lot of material in there to ignite. In the event there is a fire, we certainly don't want to endanger any first responders. We have insurance. If this site goes up in flames, and we will put a claim in with our insurance company. But it is standard procedure for a first responder to disconnect the system, and that is available right on the utility pole to disconnect right from outside the site without even having to go in the site. If there is some, if they do want to enter the site, of course, they can do so, and one of the requirements in previous plans we're meeting was a lockbox, which we will provide for the firefighters. So in terms of the actual training, what we usually do and what we're prepared to do in this situation is prior to commercial operations, we will host an on-site meeting with firefighters and first responders and discuss the various components of the solar. We will provide them with training materials so that they have a binder that they can refer to if they need to. And in any future time that they decide that there's been some turnover and they want a refresher course, we're absolutely happy to provide some more information about that. Now, in terms of the decommissioning bond, I think there was a comment regarding the salvage value being included in the cost. There is absolutely salvage value here. Year one, there is quite a lot of salvage value, and as the project extends, there's less and less, but there are materials here in the steel, aluminum, copper, and silver in the panels which have value to them. We are prepared to provide a bond of an agreed upon value for the lifespan of this project, but we don't want to tie up something that's going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars to bond that. We have not only the salvage value of the solar array, but we also have, the property value of the land to kind of back if we were ever to go bankrupt, then the financiers of the project ultimately will look to sell off the site or continue running it. It's not something that, in the history of Sunlight Federal, the main financier of this company, none of the sites have ever been sold or abandoned. It's just, it goes against any of the finances of the project. I mean, the project has a financial capability for going on 30 years, even if our plan is only for 20 years.
So, as we were saying, Mr. Chairman, we're here before you tonight for preliminary. If we are to gain approval tonight, we still have a little ways to go in terms of, we need to get a building official with the town, a building permit from the town building official. We also need a special soil erosion permit from the town. And then the final plan hearing, whether that will be delegated to your administrative officer or whether we will be back before you for final plans. I know that's a lot. There's a lot of people here tonight, but I would be happy to answer questions of you or members of the board.
Can you just pass out the liability, but more importantly, that letter about the stone walls, so the board can take the...
Yes.
While that's going on, I'm going to open it up to the board.
Actually, if I may, I just have one more question
Yeah.
for Joe before we turn it over to the board. And since Mr. Casali is testifying in his capacity as an expert, I just want to ask him if he has an opinion as to whether or not the drainage requirements meet or exceed the town and state requirements. Joe, if you could address that, please.
Yeah, as stated, this project not only meets, it exceeds both the town standards and the state guidelines in terms of drainage. It meets it because it attenuates all the peak runoff rate. It exceeds it because with the great site conditions, we were able to reduce volumes and significantly volumes of water coming off of this site.
Thank you.
Anything
No
else?
questions.
From the applicant, now I'll open it up to the board, if I may. Yes, Lisa?
Regarding that drainage, you had spoken about an 18-inch pipe that goes under, I presume, 101 and then across Tucker Hollow at some point?
Yeah, there's.
That seems really small to me.
It is small, and what we needed to prove to DEM was that under proposed conditions, the amount of water leaving the site going to that 18-inch pipe is less than it is today.
And is that covered through like the 100-year flood?
It is. All of this is designed up into, so our design storm events, to be specific, we modeled the 1 year, the 2, the 10, the 25, and even the big storm event, the 100-year storm event, what Burrillville received in March of 2010. So yes, when we have decreases in peak rates and in volumes to every design point for every storm event. And that's one of the fundamental elements that we need to prove to both DOT and DEM. We need to prove to DOT that we're not going to adversely affect the state highway in any way. We're not gonna flood it, or affect it in any way. And the same with DEM. We have to prove to them that we're not going to increase pollutants to these wetlands. We're not going to increase water to these wetlands, or even other parameters such as temperature. So it's in the science, the calculations. As Dan being a professional engineer, I have also certified it, and they've been signed off at both the DEM and the DOT level as well.
And on like layman's, if that's all been done by channeling it all into these existing wetlands?
Yeah, it's done by channeling it all into these, what we call drainage appurtenances or detention basins. And what happens is the water, the detention pond detains the extra water coming off our site until the storm passes, till the water gets through that 18-inch pipe, and then slowly it meters it out. In these specific ponds, because of the good site parameters, we were able to make those infiltration basins, so while the water is waiting to be let out, we're also infiltrating a good majority of it. You know, in this specific swamp, in the 100-year design storm, over 40,000 cubic feet of water is going to that swamp in tomorrow's condition than goes there today. 40,000 gallons less if we put this in versus what happens today. So we feel as though it is, it's going to be a great benefit.
How many did you put in?
We put in 4 of them because there's 4 requisite low points on the site, and so that's the science or the basis of design behind drainage.
Charlie?
I had a couple things. There was some discussion previously about the existing trees outside of the fence not being cut. Is that still the plan?
Yes, absolutely. Our DEM permit was very specific, Joe, to the limit of disturbance. That's something that will be staked out in the field prior to construction. It was out there when we took our requisite field walks, but we do not have any plans to cut any of this. But more importantly, we don't have any authority to do it. We don't have any permits to do that. And so we are going to stay within our limit of disturbance. You know, much of, you all have seen this in its prior infancy. We've tried to push this thing as far back from the road as we can so that the natural change in grade, you won't be able to see these. I remember standing at this specific point when others were in the, at our site walks, just to make sure that we couldn't see each other, being the height of those panels. Well, the fence is 9 feet. It's the highest thing around there. So, yeah, I mean, we've discussed this. I know it's a concern of the town. You're not going to see this clear cut. You're not going to see it thinned out. Respectfully, we don't want you to see our operations any more than you don't want to see our operations.
So we can make that a condition of approval?
Absolutely.
Hold on, let Joe.
If you wouldn't mind, can you just give the distances from the, right away from the setback to the fence line? Can you,
Yeah, for relativity,
Yeah.
that setback is 50 feet.
yeah,
So in specificity, you're about 175, maybe 200 feet. I have exact dimensions I can provide. Page 4 of 10 has the specific dimensions, but just to call them out, from the fence line to the property line is 125 feet. From the fence line to the edge of road is 185 feet.
Joe?
I had a couple other things.
Yeah, no.
You want me to just do everything?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, now the power purchase agreement, you have that with the grid now? Did you see that today? Did you have to redo it?
I want to ask, the question is about the power purchase agreement.
I think Ed sent over the documentation we have from the utility.
Yeah, it was executed, I think in January of this year. Let me just pull it up.
Now, is that still active, or did it expire?
12/18/18 was executed, I can't read that, I think that says 1/31/19. And I believe it's still in full effect,
Okay.
being about a couple of months old.
No, I don't have in my packet a copy of the decommissioning bond. I don't know if you have copies of that.
We haven't actually posted one yet, we're still discussing
Well, I
it.
know the numbers that you showed, I don't have them, and I don't know if I
Oh, the new proposal that,
can. Yeah.
okay,
so we have
I think we have copies for the board. as-
something that we had, so we can look at it,
Sure.
and have something to work with. I couldn't find it. Is it in it?
There's more there anyway.
Yes, we did.
So
One
in
at a
addition,
time, please.
No, I just didn't have it, so I think it'd be easier for the board if they have something to work with. If we're gonna try to come to a consensus on this tonight.
in addition to what I provided earlier about salvage value, we reached out to the company that's doing the installation and said, can you do the reverse for us and calculate what it would cost to pull the panels? And they came up with a net value of $21,000.
You're saying it's gonna be $21,000 to take all those panels out and all
This is a
the
net
decommissioning,
value.
is that what you're telling me?
The net.
This is a net value that you can see in the itemization in front of you that
20 years from now,
I think it was about $400,000 for the actual labor,
okay?
which we think is high. We haven't had time to, bid it out to, other people.
20 years from now, that would be, we could figure it out for 20 years from now, we could see the future, 20,000 is a good number.
I think, the number that what we were gonna propose to you was that we would post a $80,000 bond to cover the cost, which would quadruple this current day cost.
Okay.
It's also not uncommon to require periodic updates to something like that, if that's something that would make the board more satisfied, is, 10 years from now, we could provide an update, but, those are pretty hard and fast numbers at today's date anyway.
Yeah,
We really don't know
That's my point.
20 years from now.
That's my point.
I can say in today's commodity market, just the silver alone in each panel is worth, good $10. So, what panels do we have, Dan?
We had 2,250 of them.
I mean, aluminum, steel, all natural resources that, are becoming potentially more valuable as time goes on.
But to clarify, it's not 20,000 to decommission this, it's close to $500,000. It's the residual value at the end is plus 20-some odd thousand.
Helen?
I don't understand what is being said here in terms of, I understand what a decommissioning bond is, and with that, somebody correct me, but I understand that that's the cost it is to, make it back to, no panels there, blank land. What I'm hearing is that I'm hearing something different rather than just a decommissioning bond, and I don't understand.
And if I may, it's probably more of a performance bond, but it's based on, it's for decommissioning. So similar to the landscape where we agree to post a $175,000 bond, and as soon as we do what we say we would do, the town would release us from that obligation. We need to post a financial instrument that would protect the town should the project go bankrupt. So how much would the town need in any given year to take this apart? It's a function of the labor less the residual value of the panels. And so in every given year, it's a different number based on the price of steel and aluminum. And so what is a fair amount? We're showing present day, it would be a positive $21,000. So you wouldn't need a bond if you had to decommission it, but if in any one year you did, and you needed money, what's a fair amount to post? That's what we're trying to determine, is the amount of performance
You're
bond.
talking chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Right, if we did not have the wherewithal to,
Yeah, because the difference between chapter 7 bankruptcy and chapter 11 bankruptcy, you're talking.
right, this is not a reorganization, this
Right.
is, if we were absolutely
Complete bankruptcy.
11, what would happen? The town is stuck with these panels. You would enter into probably a contractual agreement with someone that would decommission this.
And salvage it and spread.
But on the back end, the panels are worth monies, and again, it's based on the price of steel, the price of aluminum, and different elements that are in there.
And the land itself is worth money.
In the land, so, if this was in today's values, about 500,000 to take it apart, but we think we're gonna sell the land and trade in some of these elements, for a little bit over than 5. But what happens in other years, when these prices escalate, and maybe the buyback isn't as high as it is today? So what's a fair value for us to post to protect the town?
You're figuring residual value at 488, is that gonna go up or down?
The residual value is about 21.
Well, you have modular residual value here at 488,000. Where's that number coming from?
Panels itself, I think.
Right, that would be,
That's salvage of the panels themselves, I'm assuming.
yes, I believe so.
Yes,
Okay. At the end of 20 years, these things are supposedly have a warranty life of 20 years. So that may be 0.
no, time value of money, it's gonna go up, not down, John.
Silver's gonna be worth more, aluminum's gonna be worth
But it's the material value that we're
Right,
looking at.
that's, yes, the materials, the value of the materials, unless somebody finds a gold mine or a silver mine,
do it.
force, has to go up.
Plus, they're still functional at the end of 20 years. They can go on
Right.
beyond
I
20
mean,
years.
my car has a 3-year warranty, it's still gonna run for 10 years. And the panels themselves have been shown to last 40 to 50 years. So, I mean, we will run this thing as long as possible because it is producing power and
You would
making
even
money.
replace panels as necessary.
And we replace panels when necessary. And the system actually will function, even if we didn't replace panels, the system would function with a reduced capacity. It's not that if we lose a few panels, the system doesn't work anymore. It'll continue to function.
Isn't it like a 1% decline per year or something like that for the industry standard?
That is
Yeah.
correct. The industry standard estimation is 1%, and actually with current manufacturing techniques, it's been shown that that's been a lot lower. So the 20-year warranty they refer to is warranting that at year 20, the panels will still produce at least 80% of the power that they started out with.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can, I'd like to follow up on that. That was something that was testified to at master plan that I think is important to understand, that even in their 20-year period, operating at 80 to 90% capacity, it's still a functioning, profitable entity.
Lisa,
How often is it going to be inspected for this hail damage or different types of damage to the things? How often are you going to be in there inspecting it, making sure there's not
Your
runoff
question-
that?
Okay, the system has a data acquisition system which alerts us to any problems without actually us having to go on site. We do 2 to 3 inspections per year, physical inspections. We come out, we look at things. But on a computer, we can see if, and especially in a system like this, every 2 panels is monitored. So literally, if a single panel goes down, we can know about it. We get told about it.
Now, if going down, is that different?
And they are
Can it be
tested for hail,
damaged?
by the way.
Can it be damaged and still functioning?
It
Or
can
if
actually.
it's cracked, is it not, if you won't know unless you physically inspect?
That is correct. It can actually function cracked. And there is an interior interior material, which, you know, is kind of like a silicone kind of like rubbery material which seals the panel. But in the event that water gets to it, it will slowly start failing. And then we'll, you know, and we'll know about it.
Does anything come out as like toxic chemicals
Oh, no,
out of that?
no.
That membrane, what protects
the
any of
interior-
the chemicals?
The interior materials are the silicone, which is what we know as glass, is sand on the beach. It's not the sand dust that people are concerned with breathing in. It's not a dust form, it's a crystalline form. So these are not the type of panels that have any toxic material. They can actually be disposed of in regular landfill waste. There's no toxic materials to them, and they don't leach into the groundwater.
So, Mr. Chairman, in terms of operation management, for your question, just want to reintroduce, there's a couple of documents. One, we testified to at master plan, was there is an operation and maintenance plan for this entire facility. And we expect that to be recorded in the land evidence records and adhered to, and it goes through everything from emergency response to routine maintenance of cutting the grass. But also as part of our DM and every DM permit, an operation and maintenance manual was filed and approved with DEM on how all of the drainage is operated every year and maintained. It's in your packet, but it may have been buried in one of these. That's, you know, our O&M plan. So, and again, that goes through from the detention basin, so forth and so on, and what we need to do, and that's been approved by DEM, that's been approved by DOT, and that too will be recorded in the land evidence records. So, there's a lot to it in terms of maintaining some of these complex drainage.
Joe, did you have something?
I was just kind of following up on the decommissioning. I think now the module residual value, obviously, that's you're gonna sell these to somebody else to use? Is that what you-
That would be if they were salvaged. They could either be reused or they could be sold as scrap for the material.
Right. Now, if we, in a worst case scenario, we went into bankruptcy and we got stuck trying to do something with this. I mean, we need money to get somebody to come in and do this work and recover these things, you know, so I think $20,000 is probably, you know, the 80,000 maybe more, but I still think, you know, it'd be quite expensive to hire somebody to go up here and, you know, take this place down.
Just to go into detail, the actual installation cost, the mechanical installation cost is, I think less than that amount. I mean, it's not, it's less than the number that they came here for installing it, and that includes licensed electricians. When we come to decommission it, we don't expect that we will need, you know, licensed electricians to confirm that the bondings are correct and everything else.
So let me try and solidify this. Once the land is clear, how long will it take you to put this field up?
Probably about 2 months, I would think.
All right, 2 months.
And we're, just to, Joe, we're not asking to post $20,000 in performance bond. That calculation was asked of us by the town so that we could discuss what an appropriate amount is. We believe it's at least triple.
But bear in mind that the salvage company is going to pay you to come in and take that out. It's not going, you're not going to have to hire them, they're
But we
just
really
going to
don't
take
know
it
what
out.
the rates are gonna be for recycled metals.
Excuse me,
Sorry.
excuse me, right?
I mean, if it's a running facility, obviously the town has the option of keeping it up and running as they require it from the
Question I have, probably for you, Joe, or maybe the landscape architect here. Do you guys have any revegetation plan when we decommission this? After you take this all out, we're gonna have an empty field there. There's gonna be nothing there but a bunch of holes. Have you guys put together a plan to revegetate that area? I think that would be important because once you take all of that away, the neighbors and everybody else. I won't be around 20 years
I
from
think it's
now,
currently.
but their kids will be around, and we're gonna have a bunch of holes there. And it, from me speaking to a couple of, it's about 300 to 400 trees and seedlings an acre to get that back to some sort of greenery. And my next question is, from the site walk, is there is you got all that ledge, and I believe the zoning said no blasting or crushing or whatever. And your plans on putting the panels on the ledge is how? You're gonna put cement bases on them?
Right, so two questions. One, in terms of DEM, in my experience, every time a wetland would need to be remediated, we would let that go back naturally.
Well, that would be in the wetland area, Joe. I'm talking about, you got how many panels over that hill?
Right.
That's not in the wetlands.
I don't know that we would artificially plant that and not let that to grow back naturally.
What's gonna grow back? Grass?
Exactly
You're
what
taking out-
grew there today, first pines and the oaks.
Well, that doesn't grow back unless you.
Just to be clear, what scenario are we talking about? We still own the land. If we decide to build a house on it, if we decide to build I mean, obviously, we're not gonna let if there's a house on it, we're not going to leave holes in the backyard.
Yeah, but that's 20 years down the road if you build a house, so if it's just as an investment deal coming in here and you're just gonna put up your solar farm and then decommission it 20 years from now, nobody's gonna build anything and you're just gonna leave the town with a bare, rotten-looking hill.
So you're making a statement, what do you want them or asking them to do? Because.
Some sort of a plan,
All
some
right,
sort
so
of a plan when they
let me address
decommission
this
it.
to you. After a fire,
Yeah,
the land is bare. The first thing that comes up is the grass. About 15 years later, the brush comes up, and then after that, the trees set in.
correct.
That's what he's telling you they're proposing. Now, what do you want them to do? Let's get to that,
Well, when they decommission it and they take everything out,
right?
grass is gonna grow, that's 20 years from now when we decommission it, grass is gonna grow. By the time it gets back to some sort of vegetative state, it's gonna be a long time.
So what is it you want them to do?
When it's decommissioned, I think plant seedlings out there and bring it back to its natural state.
But with all due respect, we're gonna own the lot at that particular point in time. You're gonna put a restriction on the lot owner that they have to grow trees on their property? If we wanted to keep it as a field, I think that would be our prerogative to do that.
It would be nice if it was like that, other than just pulling everything out and just leaving it.
But it's still a valuable asset. It's 45 acres of land.
Respectfully, the entity that's giving us the permit to cut, DEM, is not mentioning anything. And we're not gonna be able to see this when the panels are there, never mind when the panels are there. I just don't wanna mischaracterize.
Okay,
That we
I
don't do
understand
a
that.
rotten hole because.
I understand. I told you the last time it happened around here with that, now, your solar panels are gonna be put on some sort of cement.
Right, so there's various racking systems that can be. We will pin these to the ledge and take advantage of the innocuous terrain. If you see the grading plan, which is page 5, we're grading and touching very little in terms of disturbance. I don't know if you have had the opportunity to see the solar field that was built in Warwick. You can see from Route 37, but you can see how that moves with the dramatic change in grade. Having met with the racking company, the plan would be just like we would put any foundation on ledge, we're going to pin it and take advantage of that rigid structure.
Okay.
So there's a question from the solicitor, please.
The racking system that you're talking about, is that included in the decommission plan?
Yeah, so the racking system is what the panels will actually sit on. They call them racks, and I think Anthony is asking me how are we going to fasten them, are we drilling and putting flat pads? In this case, no, we will adjust them to different heights and pin them to the ledge.
But then they'll come off when you remove the panels, that racking system, you're not
Yes.
gonna leave that out there?
Yes, and
That's listed on Jerry's foundation removal. They're actually screws, they will leave a hole probably about that big,
Yeah,
in the location.
I was just concerned that we were putting cement pads there when you decommission it? Do we leave the cement pads there? And, you know, it's all well and good now. 20 years from now, nobody's gonna be here but our kids to take a look at whatever's there,
What we done?
okay? Which I'm kind of concerned about that.
That's right,
Excuse me.
what we done?
What is the racking system made out of? What is the material?
It's a combination of steel and aluminum.
All right, thank you.
Can you,
Helen?
can you say again the racking that is not attached to the ledge itself?
It will,
It's
it'll
attached to
actually
what?
be pinned, the racks themselves will be drilled and pinned into the ledge, similar to a foundation.
Through the whole, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but is that the only way that there's no cement?
Right, because of this plan, this particular racking system is gonna be pinned to the ledge, yes.
So it gets drilled?
We're not gonna flatten that ledge and pour a concrete pad, and we're not gonna drill into that ledge and try to lolly these in.
No sonotubes?
Right, we're not gonna do that, we're just gonna pin them.
All right, the solicitor has another question, please.
So I know the bond was a big issue for the board. The 80,000 that you proposed, how did you get to that number? Have you asked this company to kind of do a projection for 20 years from now? Or, I mean, this 21,000 is obviously based on today's value. I'm sorry, this. The 21,000 is based on today's value. So is the 80,000 a projection that you guys prepared, that the bonding company prepared, that someone else prepared for you, or?
So we have a real number for decommissioning in terms of labor. And we can always adjust that based on time value of money in future years, so we're guessing at the rate of return. The unknown here is, as Peter said, you're not gonna hire a site contractor to come and do this. It's gonna be a salvage company that's going to come and do this. But what are the materials worth in the coming years? We don't know what they'll be worth. They could be worth far in excess, they could be worth less. But the relativity is, how do the two numbers interact together? It's gonna be much more than $500,000 in 20 years to decommission this, but we could be getting much more for the residual value. So we wanna find, like your PMI insurance or would do that, we wanna calculate what would be the greatest spread.
All right, so let me just, your 20 to get to 80 is 10% in 20 years to get to 80,000.
So our 20 is, what would it cost today? That's 20. What would it cost in 20 years? Let's come up with a fair number.
Well, that's what I just wanted, you're giving me 80 and that's at 10%, all right? So let's get to,
Just to be clear, like a decommissioning bond like this, we could be spending close to the actual cost of the decommissioning over the 20 years to pay for that bond. So that's why we're trying to, come up with a, reasonable
right, so
value.
you're the guys trying to make a reasonable presentation. So is the 20,
So I took this 20 number and I said, well, 20, 30 years from now, if it's 4 times more, that's $80,000. You asked me how I came up with that number. I said 4 times the amount, that's gotta be a fair number.
It was arbitrary at best.
It's arbitrary, just like any analysis.
right, all
made.
right. But where you are is, you just moved from 20 to 30. I have no problem with, I'm not trying to be argumentative, okay? It's just a matter of 20 may be light in 20 years.
And that's why we said 80. So
Okay.
we'll cover 80.
You'll cover 80 in 20 years.
We'll fund a bond for $80,000.
All right, okay. Everybody got it?
80,000.
80,000.
So it would be a 20-year performance bond based on decommissioning of no more than 80,000.
Right.
If there was a way to put the money in an account, we would rather do that because it wouldn't cost us money and it would, gain interest, but I don't think there's a legal financial vehicle to do that.
We do a cash bond, I guess if, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the town has taken cash back.
Yeah, we'll take a cash bond.
I mean, if that's, if that's the other alternative, we could
I
always,
would like to
yeah.
speak to the treasurer.
Yeah.
I know we've done it in the past.
Let's talk
For
about this
performance
again,
bond, yeah,
but
yeah.
shouldn't speak.
If we can agree on the number, I think we can figure out how to get there, so. yeah.
Cash bonds are fun.
Yes. Are there any other
Oh, I'm
questions?
sorry, Lisa.
Back to
Mike, I
the
see.
landscaping, what is the warranty for the landscape? How long do you warranty that it's gonna live? You're gonna plant a bunch of stuff and then everybody goes away and everybody's happy, fine, and dandy, but something's passed and then the trees all die in a year.
I believe that there are warranties for 2 years.
On your proposal, it said a 1-year guarantee.
1 year, okay, 1 year.
And then they're replaced?
Within that 1 year warranty period, if anything dies or is in decline, it would be replaced at the end of that
All
1
right,
year.
so let me move in on this, please. What are you planning? Because on ledge, it's gonna be very susceptible to drought. When are you gonna, and when are you gonna plant? The fall, the spring?
So that's a list of materials, if you can see that, Mr. Chairman. White fir, the cypress, the red cedar, spruce, American holly, and that's hydro seed.
Okay, so, but again, I'm gonna ask, when were you gonna plant, spring or fall?
Well, it would depend on when we were ready to plant.
So, but if you're gonna plant in the spring and you're on ledge, I'm gonna ask what you're gonna do to water to keep them alive.
Well, that would be the contractor's responsibility.
Yep,
So
go ahead.
what the contractor would do is, it would be his responsibility for 1 year to water these plants, and if a water buffalo is necessary for irrigation,
Well,
then
that's-
that is absolutely part. If it makes the town comfortable, we can double our performance bond for 2 years. Now, if anything happens, we've got 2 years from planting that you have $175,000 performance bond.
So, I'm gonna ask, do these ponds ever go dry, do we know?
By law, they have to. The ponds are in Rhode Island, not to be too technical, but they have to empty within 24 to 72 hours.
All right.
They can't empty
Well, I
before.
was just looking for a
Yeah.
water source, and you said a water buffalo.
I've done it before where we've captured some of the stormwater in cisterns. For irrigation, it's fine. For public safety, for fire suppression, it's a little tenuous. But it's certainly,
All right.
I mean, I was just gonna say, if there was already a 1-year guarantee, would you be willing to post a performance bond for the additional year? But you answered my question.
Maybe do it as a maintenance bond, similar to what you do for a
Yeah.
road, yeah.
yes, yes. And so that would require watering, so, you know,
Yeah.
in 750 days, if the cypress are not alive,
Yeah, all right. Somebody else, please? Mike, did you? Yes.
There's a lot of folks waiting, I'm sure, so I'm want to try to be really brief, because we've already given you conditions. One of the first things that was discussed was training the first responders, and we kind of limited that to fire. Okay, the biggest concern that we have is rescue. Okay, there's a big area, someone can get injured on that big 20 acre, 42 acre property. We're going to get one load in and out, okay? And specifically in our condition, all we asked for was that the amendment to the maintenance plan included training for emergency personnel. I'm gonna request that training be day and night, okay? And that's simply because of liability, okay? And extreme difficulty, and seasonal, 24/7 seasonal. We have to be sure people can get in and out of it. And the reason is when we pull your disconnect switch, the utility, I don't think we're gonna have any lights on that compound. Am I correct?
Correct.
So, again, that would just be an amendment to this condition 14.
Okay, we have the 9 foot,
Additional
we have the
conditions.
9 foot fence, to be clear.
Just night and day to familiarize your folks and our first responders with night ops, okay, because we are dark for a good portion of the year. Now, the other thing, again, very specifically, I'm going to refer to your correspondence with the DEM Charles A. Horvath, permitting supervisor. And specifically, he had a concern about grade. And that's obvious to everybody here who's walked the site. There's pretty steep grades out there. And you kind of confirm that you're not going to disturb that. That you're going to try to amend the construction practice to accommodate the grade. However, there is an access road going in and out. That's going to be the only access. Am I correct? Okay. Your answer to Mr. Charles A. Horvath was that a 10% grade would be maintained as necessary to accommodate emergency vehicles.
Right, so that was-
Again, I want to be quick and specific. I think we need to add a condition, okay, to be sure that that's seasonally adjusted, okay, because of the fact that we do get snow. And a 10% grade in the summer, okay, on a dry road is negotiable, right? Anthony, you drive, own many vehicles, I'm familiar with vehicles. So again, it goes to health and safety, which we're responsible for our community, and our first responders are part of our community. So if in fact they're dealing with 10% grade access, we have to make a seasonal adjustment somehow, okay, to be sure that they'll have access in the snow and ice as well as the dry paper. And that can just be acknowledged or accommodated as we fit. Again, that is going to be a condition.
So my concern is, what we had portrayed to DEM was that your town code, as you know, the maximum grade for a roadway is 8%. 8%, and that includes inclement weather. What I think Mr. Horvath was asking and what we conveyed to him was, what are you going to do for this roadway? And we said that it will be no more than 10% because of the issue in which it's crushed stone. If you want us to flatten this, in essence, what you're doing is we're going to be disturbing and grading more of the site. But I would like to understand what level would you like me to flatten it to?
No, we're not talking about telling you how to build, how to accommodate the, like you said, roadway grade 8%. What we're looking at here is a off-site facility, and that road's probably not gonna be plowed all the time, salted and sanded. So it's gonna be a crushed rock surface. It's going to be very, very slippery even with a minimal amount of snow. So the accommodation for that, okay, would be, again, training, okay, an alternate way of reaching that facility if it's necessary.
So are you looking for us to train the first responders to operate on a 10% road, or are you asking us to reduce the grade of the road?
No, just how to access what you've constructed. If you feel it's safe and accessible, that's fine, but it should be included in the training, because that's the requirement that you put in. You said that the 10% grade would be your objective.
That'd be the maximum.
Would be the max. Okay. So if in fact there are 10% grades, part of the training would be negotiating those 10% grades on the road that you constructed year round. Okay, which means they probably would want to bring an ambulance and or emergency vehicle to the site to just make sure they're okay with that. And they're familiar with it, not go out there the first time it happens and not be able to get it done. So I apologize for the misleading of that. I wasn't suggesting any construction changes. Now the other things that need to be entered in the maintenance plan, okay, and that are also a result of a give and take back and forth with the DEM was, in fact, a lot of us here are familiar with the crushed stone roads and the maintenance that they require, okay? That should be in your maintenance, operation maintenance plan. I did review that, I don't remember seeing that. Not normally something we're concerned ourselves with, but in fact, the way it was stated was proposed access driveway details 6 on sheet 9 and 10 indicates just crushed stone will be used, okay? He wanted to watch crushed stone, it's between you and him. How often the driveway will be used throughout the year, all right? Is gonna possibly dictate that. Long-term operation maintenance plan, please include a section for maintenance of the access driveway to ensure a long-term service of perviousness, okay? And occasional maintenance to scarify the gravel surface. Now, that would mean more to you than it would to me, okay? But if you have that 10% grade going in, okay, you got the dog leg to cover the entrance, so there's a pretty, you know, tight radius turn going in. Make sure that's in the maintenance plan. I will add, that would be a condition I think that we would add, that is something that you pay attention to simply because of the nature of the terrain. And the other thing that should be added in, okay, are the sediment traps, okay? Let's see. And that would be something that's unusual for this type of installation that you, but in reviewing the plans today, those sediment traps, and we call them something else too, that you said they have to be empty after 24, 72 hours. They're capturing a lot of water and they're releasing a lot of that water. And the function is very much dependent on regular maintenance. There are several areas close by here where we used to call them settling ponds, sediment traps, whatever. If they're not maintained and the vegetation's not kept down, and the drain cleanouts, in fact, yours have cleanouts, okay, in the pipe, 12-inch PCV pipe, running in and out of these settling ponds that you pointed out. There are 4 of them, okay. They need to be cleaned out, and there was a statement in here, okay, and this goes to the storm potential. I believe that the rates of runoff were calculated on a 25-year storm, not a 100-year storm. And a comment again from Mr. Morton was the fact that, and I'll just quote this rather than give it, I don't want to take too much time, but it's very, very important, okay? The proposed design currently has steep slopes that are not protected, and real gully erosion could occur during the storm events. Please add a note to the soil and erosion sediment control notes on 210 that will describe in the event of a significant storm is forecasted, there will be sediment barriers on the site ready to use on all steep slopes on site to prevent erosion from occurring. Would you be kind enough to clarify if that's still the case and you are planning to use the sediment barriers?
Yes.
And will they be kept on site? No, I'm not questioning it. I'm
No,
saying-
I just want, this is our maintenance agreement that
Will
was filed in.
those barriers be kept?
Access road.
I'm sorry, we both talking at the same time.
Yeah, well, this, we're gonna put a condition, it's the infiltration basin maintenance, the access road maintenance is there, so we can form any condition around it.
I believe that you included it in your plans.
Yes.
On the second page.
Correct.
There is something about the storms.
If-
That
My question is, if in fact the sediment barriers are required in addition to all of the excavation that's taking place and all of the elements that are being used to control runoff, if sediment barriers are required, I'm familiar with spill boom in a lot of marine work. Also familiar with hay bales, familiar with the roll-ups on the side of the road, we've all seen them. What are you gonna have there, and who's gonna be charged with the responsibility of putting it in place before storms? Again, I'm only asking that simply because it's a huge task. I can't imagine trying to get, there's no quantities here. How many feet, where are they gonna be kept? Who's charged with that responsibility? this is pretty important. If in fact they are gonna be on site, you know, are they gonna be serviceable?
May
Please?
I? May I?
Oh, yeah, I just don't know.
Sediment traps were not required by DEM.
Yeah,
No, what he's.
sediment barriers, not traps, sediment barriers. He said-
Right, and so there are sediment erosion control measures around the entire site. They're Rhode Island standards in terms of the silt fence. There is a maintenance schedule we have approved by DEM and is before the town, specifically who is responsible, who is going to maintain the road, when and how. I just forwarded that to you. And also the sedimentation during construction and after construction. I assure you, that is requisite to
You're
getting.
misinterpreting, I'm just going by what I'm reading. You said here, okay? A note has been added to the soil and erosion and sediment control notes, okay? Stating that in the event that a significant storm is forecasted, contractor shall have necessary sediment barriers on site, okay? In a ready-to-use condition to be placed on all steep slopes to prevent erosion from occurring.
May I,
That's the contractor's charge, and he will be held to that.
excuse me, these letters that he's quoting were prior, in the discussion, before you received your approval.
This is October. This is October, just we can look.
And once we responded accordingly, Mr. Chairman.
Hold on, please.
October 25th, 2018.
All right, and when did you receive your approval? So like-
January of 19.
Okay,
January
so
2nd,
what you're,
2019.
so what you're asking were conversations back and forth. I read all those papers. Before the approval, so this was moved away or added to, but they have an approval that may not include the things you're reading in that letter. Is that where we are?
Correct.
So you just handed me these two papers, and I still don't see where the sediment barriers are.
So the two papers I handed you, one was, your initial question, Mike, was about the access road, and that is in our maintenance agreement. Your second question was about the ponds, that too is in the maintenance agreement. And the third question was the response to Mr. Horvath, which Helen is pointing out to you right now.
And may I ask, on your road, is there any possibility, I don't know if it's legal, illegal, not usable, for reprocess instead of crushed stone?
We specify crushed stone, that's what we expect.
Okay, all right. But I mean, once that stuff packs down, it's less likely to need that much maintenance.
And I think that's DEM's aversion to
Okay,
it.
all right, that's fine.
They don't want a roadway
All right.
in the middle of 28.
So one other question in regards to access, is there enough room between the arrays, I'm gonna call them, I think I have it right, for a vehicle to travel down between them?
Yeah, because we need to mow the grass.
What's the difference between the?
Is it 11
the
feet?
About
distance?
10 to 12 feet.
10 to 12 feet, I'd say.
All right, so I don't know how big our ambulance is, but, so I just wanted to get that out there. Mike or Helen, you wanna go back, please?
In the plan, it says, in the event, this is under soil erosion and sedimentation control notes. I think I can read it. I spent a lot of time with the magnifying glass trying to read it previously. In the event that a significant storm is forecast, contractor shall have the necessary sediment barriers on site in a ready-to-use condition to be placed on all steep slopes on the site to prevent erosion from occurring.
Correct. So those are our contract documents. Those are binding in terms of when we hire someone, the expectations and the enforcement.
That's under construction, correct?
It's your means and methods.
It's under, when it's under construction. There's not gonna be anybody there with a barrier after this is up, like, and gonna run out there when we get one of the big storms and start laying out a barrier. So that's not happening. That's only in there when they're putting it up. If it starts raining, or a storm, the contractor's gonna put it out, and we'll find out they'll be home in the car, and none of it will be up, so. We're just being a container on site.
Well, that's not really relevant, it's a contractual obligation that we have, so.
Well, if there's damage caused by the failure to perform by the contractor, then the contractor's held to
That's right.
repair and replace.
Thank you very much. I think you answered my questions, and I'll just add those conditions for the things that were not covered.
You have something else?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Anything else from the board? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just before you close, I'd like to reserve the opportunity to make some closing comments once the objectors.
And I may call on you to address the question.
I'm not going anywhere, so yes.
Okay? Now, I'm gonna repeat, the abutters may speak first, okay, and only the abutters. After the abutters are done, I will allow other people from Foster to speak for 2 minutes. And then if there's still people that would like to speak, if the world hasn't ended by then, I'll allow that. I must remind everybody that stenographer cannot hear 2 people talking at once, all right? So, is there an abutter that would like to speak?
I would like to, Monique Taylor.
Step up, please. Hold on, let me check your name, please.
I'm at 14 Hartford Pike.
Could you show me your name, please? Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, what's the witness's name?
Monique Taylor and Steve Philman.
14 Hartford
14
Pike.
Hartford Pike. You want to swear in?
I'm sorry? Yes, please.
I don't see her on my list of abutters.
Right here, it's Stephen Philman is the first name, second to last. That's what threw me too.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. You say your full name and spell your last name for the record. Monique Taylor, Taylor. All right, I'd like to request an environmental impact study, and I'm going to show evidence why I'm requesting it. Also, the Defenders of the Animals, Dennis Tabella, asked for an environmental impact study last year, and again more recently. You should have his faxes. My first evidence is a photograph of an eagle that works Dolly Cole Brook. It's been mentioned several times. It is possible that that eagle has nesting spots on the property, and I doubt that they're going to stop construction for a bird's nest. I also have bobcat pictures at Dolly Cole Brook. An environmental impact study would show any rare species on that property site. Second, runoff is likely to end up in Dolly Cole Brook, and you said it will. Yes, at this point, it is a designated trout water. Yes, it is definitely a designated trout water, and I do have proof. I have a printed copy here from the DEM. You can get it on the site, and I recommend that the environmental impact study, because it will adjust the issue of silt runoff from the proposed solar. And this is that. I outlined it. Third, I received a letter from Tim Ives. He's an archaeologist at the Rhode Island Preservation. He did an aerial photography and a LIRAD mapping of the proposed property. I'll read a portion of his letter. This property bears evidence of stone-walled 19th century architectural field systems and topographic anomalies that may represent abandoned house cellars of building foundations. Accordingly, one could qualify these as comprising historic archaeological sites, site remains, or elements of a historic landscape, depending on one's point of view. The property also has the potential to contain Native American sites as well.
Mr. Chairman, I know this isn't a formal rules of evidence, but I would
Excuse me.
object to
Hold
the
on,
inclusion.
My turn.
Hey,
Let me
him
please
talk.
run the meeting.
You've done your talking before.
Excuse me. Thank you. All right? Let me run the meeting, please. Thank you.
This is.
I've already asked the attorney. so-
Okay, thank you.
This is a copy of this letter. Okay. This also coincides with Kathy Brackett's statement last year that her grandfather had owned the property, had buildings and farmed it. Now the letter brings into question the rock walls, which you guys have already mentioned. Foster has rules and regulations for rock walls, and if there's going to be any alterations, the abutters need to be notified, and applications must be in place as part of the land development. You guys don't need a copy of your rules, right? Okay, the only other question that I would have to you is, do you even know if any of this is toxic waste?
Yes, we do know it is not. Okay, so I asked the attorney if we have the right to ask for an environmental study. Her answer was no. So you can take your
So
information.
that was a big waste of time.
Well, I could have cut you off,
I
and
know.
I'd rather not,
I
okay?
appreciate you letting me talk.
So, you know, you had your time, and I tried to answer your question as best I could.
Thank you.
Any other abutter?
I think there's 3 more letters here.
Well, I'm asking if they would like to speak. You're all here, speak.
Tim Harkin, 2 Harkin Pike.
Hold on, please. You show me one, please. Okay. You said Tim, though.
I go
All
by
right,
Tim.
so-
I'll, for the record, it's Michael Harkin. Middle name is Tim.
Wait a minute.
Yep.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. I too was going to request an environmental study, but Chairman,
Yeah.
this one, I'll ask you, what is the rationale for not having the quote-unquote right for an environmental study? Because the DEM said that we're just gonna let this stuff go through the watershed and there's no residual stuff that you feel is gonna be detrimental. Is that
I
clear
think,
and simple?
no, I think that the question you're asking is, let me answer it differently. DEM has addressed the questions of these runoffs with the sediment ponds, with the, during the building, all the things that need to be addressed, any water that would be run off, DEM is right now okay.
Is wildlife considered part of the environment?
So here's the issue, is that our solar ordinance doesn't require an applicant to submit that. So that means that we can't, the board can't require it, so we have to submit that to us before we approve it. It's not in our ordinance. However, after this application was grandfathered, and there is a moratorium, so we will be rewriting the ordinance. So these suggestions would be very helpful for the ordinance that will govern future applications. But unfortunately, this is governed by our old.
So all we can do is put stipulations on what they might propose.
Correct.
I mean, wife and I have lived 30 years, we've raised 4 kids. The reason we bought the property is because it's 4 acres with a pond that I can't believe might be compromised because no environmental study is required. The DEM says, yeah, that's good, man, everything's no problem. It's a sunshine day, man. no problem. Everything these guys have said seems to me to just be pie in the sky, happy horse crap. And there's no consideration for what's gonna happen to our property. You're deforesting the state. I was up on Route 98 today, up by Crystal Lake. There's a giant installation up there, giant. Somebody's fixing their farmland, okay. Last week, Rogers, Mr. Rogers, you were probably there. There was a House committee meeting, Bill H. 5789. All these environmental groups, Rhode Island Woodland Partnership, Save the Bay, another guy, Scott Millar from Grow Smart Rhode Island, they are all involved with supporting this whole green energy piece, but all of them around me reject the proposals around the state where they're just deforesting places, right? 75% of all the watershed from this area in the state goes down to Narragansett Bay. I guess the DEM doesn't think there's gonna be a problem. Well, what if there is? The moratorium is set. This project's gonna go forward. We can put stipulations in there. But it's just, it's a travesty that for 20 years, for a quick buck on 20 years for green energy, to really ruin part of our community. 40 acres of woodland. I see eagles, bobcats, 15 different types of ducks, otters, beavers come through my pond. What is going to happen if, and I'm on the eastern side here, my pond is on the eastern side. Nobody knows. It's all conjecture. It's all steeped in a belief that nothing's going to happen. But if it does, it's crap. It's just crap. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other abutter that would like to speak?
My name is Donna Fontenot, 50 Tucker Hollow Road.
What's your last name again?
Fontenauo.
Donna?
Yep.
What are your name, please? Thank you.
I have a couple questions.
Would you just have to be sworn?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
So a couple questions for the board. As far as the deconditioning, we have quite a few questions on the deconditioning. And it was 20,000 with possibility of raising it to 80,000, with the stipulation that we are going to maybe recoup some from the aluminum and whatnot. However, that stone driveway is 1,000 feet, 1,200 feet. That is something to think about when you put a price on deconditioning that particular thing, because that is not going to generate any money. If anything, it's going to cost money to have that much rock removed. So that's something. The other thing is, who's responsible for vegetation checks for the 1 to 2 year plan? Is it the town? Or the
Zoning official.
zoning official? So how often would they be going out?
In actuality, I think you're also going to require.
We are, we're gonna want the $175,000 bond release.
Right, and you're going to inspect that.
Come to you and ask you for an inspection and sign.
So again, that's just something to think about as to really monitor that sort of thing. Because I know we had some trouble with Route 6. The 18-inch pipe that's going to be dumping under Tucker Hollow, where exactly is that going to land out at Tucker Hollow? It's going across the street to Tucker Hollow. Is it going to be on the left-hand side emptying? Is it going to be on the right-hand side?
It's already there.
The one that they're adding. Aren't you adding the pipe?
No, it's already.
Oh, it's in there? Okay. All right. So that additional water, where does it, that drains, I believe, to the left? Of Tucker Hollow?
The way it's running right now.
To the,
It must be across the street from your house, though, I think. It can't be ended on your land, or you know about it.
And does DEM have any plans to inspect this particular project? Because
I don't think DEM inspects. They
so once
do?
they,
The DEM absolutely has a right to inspect. This is a insignificant alteration permit. It wasn't an application for all the freshwater wetlands, so they'll be periodic. as the design professional, I'm required to sign a 128 Rhode Island State Building Form to your zoning official and give him periodic site inspections, monthly or bi-monthly, in accordance with your local code and the
So
state.
you do it, not DEM?
They have the right to do it, we do it, and they also have the right to check us.
You send your findings to the town, or?
Yes, I am required by law to send my reports to the building
So
official.
they'll be getting reports every 2 months or so?
It'll either be every month or every 2 weeks
Okay. For the life of the project, 20 years plus?
for the construction of the project, to certify that
Right,
it
I'm
was.
saying after it's constructed, who is going to be checking the wetlands, making sure that there's not an overabundance of runoff, making sure that those are filtering as you say
That's
they would?
when it gets transferred to your zoning official.
So the zoning officials, so maybe that should be something put on the plan where they have some, responsibility to check this every so often, or, I don't know. And I don't know why it would be the zoning plan, because how do they know about the wetlands? I mean, are they,
Well, it's like when you build your house, the building official doesn't keep coming back and making sure that your house is in accordance with the code. Once you get your permit, if there's a complaint, the zoning official would go out, but I don't know that Mark has the time to go to every property every week.
Probably not, but people call, I mean, DM does do inspections if somebody calls and says there's silt in my pond or there's silt in the pond next door, they'll come out and
because
look
I mean,
at it.
this is something that we know is going to be filtered into these wetlands.
It's absolutely will not be filtered into this wetlands. If it is, we are not in accordance with either of our permits.
So what is it that's going from the detainment,
Just a clean water.
and so many gallons are going to be processed out?
Right, so the theory is that the silt settles into the pond and then the clean water goes out. Once the site is constructed, there won't be any more erosion, there won't be any more silt, it'll be a temporary condition.
I think I'm more concerned with the water runoff. I want to make sure that it's timed right, because, I mean, we have a lot of, just Tucker Hollow, for instance, I mean, has, and we've had one pipe at one point at maybe a third down Tucker Hollow, kind of near the gun club area, or basically at Tucker Hollow. And now we have like maybe 3 or 4, because it was such an issue, our road kept washing out. So I'm just kind of concerned about how the monitoring of that runoff is going to happen. I think you had said it was going to be like timed to so many gallons.
It is, it's gonna be timed, and there will be reductions in the post-construction, and the water will be cleaner in post-construction. It's part of the charge, the DEM requirements. They're not gonna let us,
And I understand that.
they're not gonna let us destroy that
Hold on,
wetland.
please. If you ask a question and he tries to answer it, could he finish it? Okay.
They're not gonna let us dump silt into that brook. What Ms. Taylor said about the trout is absolutely correct. Dolly Cole Brook is a cold water fishery. It has an extra level of scrutiny, the DEM, which is why we're cognizant of even the temperature of the water going into the wetlands. Never mind us dumping silt into the wetlands.
What about the amount of water that's getting dumped?
That too, that's been proven scientifically to DEM and to DOT that the amount of water will be less under post conditions. That's why we have those big holding ponds there.
So, kind of like my neighbor was saying, so everything is supposed to work out perfectly, but nobody monitors whether it is going to happen.
My name is on it, I'd be happy to stand by anything we've designed.
But DEM, if somebody makes a complaint, DEM will validate those. And
Absolutely.
if after it's constructed and it's still operating, if there is something that's wrong, they'll come out and violate the property owner and there'll be
Yes.
remediation
But to think
required.
they're gonna go there and check it on a weekly basis is probably not accurate.
Well, that'll be fine. Okay, transfers of the bond. Say this property gets sold in 5 years. Do the bonds that they're putting up, will that be automatically transferred to the next owner too? You know, is
The
that?
bond is
The bonds
for
are real.
us, not for them.
But they're, I understand the bonds go to the town, but all the legal aspects of it will be transferred, will remain the town. Will remain the town. If they decide to sell in 5 years.
It'll be remain on the site.
The bond runs with the land, not the people. And if we post a cash bond,
Then we
the
have
money's in the
that.
bank account.
As far as the electrical portion. So I live right at the end of Tucker Hollow. If something should happen with the electricity on your site, or you turn it off for maintenance or whatever, once a year, whatever, is that outages going to affect us? Because I'm fed from Foster.
The answer is no, but I'll let.
Okay, just to be clear, the regulations we have with solar arrays are that we operate in parallel with the electric utility. If the electric utility shuts down, we are required to shut down. If there's any variations in the electrical flow from the utility, our equipment immediately shuts off. Not only does it shut off, but it will not reconnect until that problem is resolved, and there's an additional amount of time, 5-minute time period, before the system turns back on. So that's solely for the protection of the linesman. And this is, goes through UL and any other safety, protocols for electrical code.
Well, any other butters that would like to speak?
Yes, sir.
Name, please.
Amita Rodman, R-O-D-M-A-N, 2742 and 26 Tucker Hollow Road. If you don't mind, I'm going to stand here.
Go right ahead.
Wait a minute.
Have to be sworn in, please.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Absolutely. Yes, it's been a long process, and I'm quite disappointed that there's been very little change in the year and a half that we've been discussing the plans. I'm also a little bit concerned that material that I've been looking at may not be as thorough as the material you are looking at. And I prepared my notes with some of the things that I had noted as deficiencies in the preliminary plan. I'm glad to hear that the landscape plan aspects are now addressed by verbal testimony that were not properly addressed on page 10 of your 4th document that was submitted. I would request, because all of us will come and go, that that which is being agreed to be submitted as part of the preliminary plan, so that when you come to approve a final plan, if you do, it's there in writing. So things that were discussed at the ZBR had a lot to do with preserving the natural border, and 2 members of the ZBR had even asked whether it could be pushed back. Since they didn't file a motion for that, it's not being done. I find that the applicant may be sincere, he's certainly extremely confident, but we are left to live with this. And it's a 20, 30-year situation. We discussed quite a bit at the ZBR about the historical stone walls. The applicant itself in the master plan proposed rebuilding those walls. I urge you to do that. You can do that along 101. You can soften the entire look of this. There was to be a report from the historical group on that. Have you received that? It's not in the preliminary plan, and it's ordered by the ZBR. This is the letter that they submitted in response to what I had asked. But we the members of... No, I don't know if it's...
Excuse me, you're going to address the board, please?
I am addressing you, sir.
Well,
I'm looking to ask if others have seen it, because we, the members of the public, who have come here based on reviewing all the material we thought was part of the preliminary plan, don't see that. So I'm just raising that as a deficiency. There was an electrical plan update dated October, there's an electrical plan dated October, 2017, that's 18 months old. There were deficiencies noted by National Grid in the distribution plan. I don't see it in the new material as having been updated. I think that should be part of it. This is also a property owner not exercising residential rights, but installing a commercial solar event. They need to be held to the same standards and the high standards that we require along our commercial corridors. For example, I asked the planning board to have the applicant clarify who's going to be doing what. We have the land held in the name of Quahog Solar LLC. We have an operations plan being submitted by Hartford Solar and NextPen. I'm a little concerned about the org chart. Who's who are we calling, and when are we calling them? And should there be changes in
private ownership, and there could be, I believe there should be formal notification to the town because of the responders and because this is a 3-year project. So those are just little requirements that can make it easier for everyone. There are going to be technical advances in the next 20 to 35 years. I am very happy to have learned tonight that these panels have no cadmium toxic material. But if there were the opportunity to upgrade the panels to like film that's highly toxic if something happens. I don't think something will happen, but I want to remind us, 2007 we had a little tornado next to Miss Taylor's property. We had one 17 months ago on Tucker Hollow Road. You can walk the road and see what it took out on one side and what it left on the other. Anything that happens on 2,250 panels could result in a problem. Therefore, I urge the planning board to require the applicant to add to the operations plan an emergency response plan. How soon will cracked glass and all the rest be cleaned up before it hits, the wetlands? The applicant himself was not here, Mr. Davari, cited at the zoning board meeting that there's a 50 to 60 decibel level. He himself is not a sound engineer. He didn't qualify himself as that. If there's a sound study supporting that statement, get it into this plan. Because the placement of the, they're not called transformers, they're called, there's a word, inverters? Inverters. They do hum. And they're going to be placed on the downhill side, as far as I understand, on the cement pad. And I have a feeling that the Larkins, the Fontaneaux, and on my land, which I plan to develop, it will be heard on a quiet night or a quiet afternoon. Night less, because they're not performing unless the moon's out, like it is tonight. So if there was a sound study that the applicant referred to, it needs to be on record. Because otherwise, I think you need a sound review. Very importantly, I do appreciate the confidence of the applicant, and there should be no problem requiring a peer review. This is very common. It's an engineering study submitted by the applicant. It needs a third-party verification. And particularly, there are pages in there that refer to the flow. That's great, but I don't know that using a 100-year plan has anything to do with the events we've seen in the last 10 years. Has anybody looked historically at the flow that happened at Storm Irene, Storm Sandy, 2007, 2010, when the road washed out? 2 ends of the road washed out.
Which road?
Tucker Hollow. So, this 18-inch existing pipe, thank goodness it doesn't hit the Fontaneaux, it goes to my land. And we are talking about what the future market value will be for me on 62 acres, which represents the ability to put 3 or 4 beautiful, appropriate, small cottage homes appropriate to foster in the woods. I present to you that there is no evidence in front of you that there is not a market impact. And I reject a realtor who cited a North Carolina study as being pertinent to this. Now, we're concerned about finances. So, you're going to impair the ability to raise money in the future of dividends. Lastly, I really have to say that this is supposed to be a partnership. The town council, in its wisdom, passed a resolution, I believe it was May 2018, requiring that all solar applications, they were barely vested at the time, come to town council. 3 meetings. No show. What does that say to us? That says to us these are an investor-developer situation being placed in our residential, gorgeous area of Foster. What does it say about all the confident statements today that they don't want to come to the table and discuss a way to do this that is far more pleasing? I'm not against solar, but we have proposed that they push it back. So have your professional staff. So did 2 members of the ZBR. And I personally spoke with Mr. Dabari, and he said he'd consider it. Nothing has changed in 15 months, and I think it should. And I reject that the planning board does not have authority to make the changes that are in keeping with the comprehensive plan. That concludes my statements. I do have an attorney here representing me, but you will decide in what order you hear him. But he represents me as an abutter.
Good evening. Tom Bergeron, I'm an attorney, and I represent Ms. Rodman. I have some comments to make tonight. Do I need to be sworn in?
No.
No, okay. As I said, I represent Ms. Rodman at 27 Tucker Hollow Road. We're asking this board to require an independent consultant review of the engineering details for this project and to file a report with the board on the environmental impact provided of this project and whether it's likely, that the environmental impact statement be given prior to approval of this plan. According to the plans, well, I would also submit, I should say from the start, that we think without this plan, the board's not able to meet its statutory findings requisite to the comprehensive plan and whether this plan is consistent with it. A portion of the town's largest designated natural heritage area is located on my client's property. According to the maps which are available on DEM's website, it appears as though the natural heritage area extends onto land that is adjacent to this development. In particular, the address is 7 and 9 Hartford Pike, located across Hartford Pike from the proposed project. According to the plans submitted by the applicant, in General Note 7, page 2, it states there are no known natural heritage areas on or immediately adjacent to the property. But according to the maps that are provided on the DEM website, there is a natural heritage area that is about 750 feet from the site. And I have copies of those DEM maps, which I can welcome to look at. Okay, provided, Mr. Chairman. Natural heritage area is defined as an area occupied by rare species or naturally noteworthy plant and animal communities. DEM used to require information of the impact on these areas as part of the stormwater management permit, but it no longer requires that. And so at this point, it doesn't seem as though DEM has reviewed the impact that this project would have on the natural heritage
So I have a
area.
question for you.
Sure.
If they used to require it and they no longer require it, what are you asking now?
I'm only bringing that up to mention the fact
So
that.
they no longer require it?
Right, they
Okay, thank you.
don't require it, and so our position is that.
Is they should, but they don't.
Actually, it's not that, it's just simply that they haven't.
Okay, thank
So
you.
so that no environmental impact statement has been done. According to the applicant's own engineering reports, stormwater from the project will discharge into Cold Brook, which runs from the site through the middle of this natural heritage area. The fact that the presence of this natural heritage area on the property adjacent to this development wasn't even known to the applicant's engineer means that neither the applicant nor the board could possibly have performed an analysis as to what impact this development will have on the natural heritage area. As this board knows, it's required to make statutory findings under General Laws 45, 23, 60. And there's several different requirements that need to be made, and the board needs to make positive findings. And I'm only going to mention 3 of them here, which we don't think are met. The first was regard to the comprehensive community plan. The natural resources element of the town's comprehensive plan lists out several natural features and their importance to the town, including both significant habitats, diverse wetland complexes, rare wetlands, and the surface area as being, quote, very high in importance, and that these areas are intended for conservation. The comprehensive plan goes on to state that the town will use outside professional agency resources as a supplement where necessary to aid in the local review process, and will explore a fee schedule to be paid by applicants for appropriate professional consulting services when assisting the project. Specifically with respect to natural heritage sites, the comprehensive plan includes the goal of requiring that a review be performed for all projects that the development, quote, not harm unique natural areas, and that the Rhode Island DEM Heritage Program, Natural Heritage Program, should be included in the site review process for the developments on these significant sites. The only way to remedy this inconsistency with the comprehensive plan is to have an environmental impact study done on this project and reviewed in detail. Additionally, we don't think that the board at this stage is able to satisfy the requirement that this comply with the zoning ordinance. In section 38-394 of the zoning ordinance, it requires that a site plan review be performed. From my review of the records, it's not entirely clear whether that was done, but whether or not it was, we think that review would reveal that this particular project doesn't comply with the following provision, which is 38-394F17, which says, and I'll quote, whenever the proposed development is situated in whole or in part within 300 feet of any pond, lake, river, or other freshwater wetland, it will not adversely affect the quality of such body of water or unreasonably affect the shoreline of such body of water. There will be no disturbance of soil within 100 feet of the outer edge of the wetland. The plans that we have before us and that appear to be before the board seem to only delineate a 50-foot setback and would not seem to comply with the town zoning ordinance. Lastly, and I'll be brief on this, the other factor that needs to be considered statutorily for this board to approve the program is, quote, that there will be no significant negative environmental impacts from the proposed development as shown in the final plan. Again, this issue has not been analyzed. The environmental impact on Dolly Cold Brook and the related natural heritage area in particular has not been analyzed. And so we think without doing that, the board can't meet those statutory findings. So again, we ask that the board consider not approving it at this time so that it can get independent review of the engineering details along with environmental impact study. That's all I have at this time.
Would you like to make this an exhibit?
I would, yes.
Okay. Make it an exhibit?
Make it an exhibit.
All right, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Your client mentioned this is an investment corporation in general. I don't know her exact words. Okay. She mentioned her land, she was going to plan to build 4 houses. That's an investment consideration, right, on her part. Now wait, now you're telling me this is, should be conservation land. And it's, what is this called, natural heritage. So are you telling me she intends to never develop this land because this is natural heritage land?
Well, very respectfully, we're not here to testify, and I'm not here to give any testimony as to the.
Right, I know, but you see, I get confused all the time. I'm not that smart and I'm old, right? Right? There was certain inconsistencies that I wanted to make sure my board heard, all right? Because I'm hearing about investments, them, not you, and I'm hearing about natural heritage land and conservation land. And if it's that, I'm wondering how later on you would come before this board representing the client saying, we're now going to build on this.
Words on that
I
later.
appreciate your point, and it's well taken, but at this stage, I'm not here to
Well,
project.
you're correct. I just wanted to, I'm just having fun, okay? I like to have fun. Thank you. Right, thank you. I like to have fun. Excuse me.
Well, you're having fun at somebody else's expense, that's what you're
No, I'm
on.
not, all right?
All right, yeah, you are, what's the residents of your town?
You just said that.
Thank you.
Sir.
Yes, the attorney has a question for Mr. Casal concerning what was just brought before us. Go ahead.
Or, I mean, whoever would like to respond, if you wanted to give us some background or just speak to the natural heritage area being 750 feet, is that something that you considered?
I mean,
You'd like to provide.
the natural, your GIS mapping shows natural heritage area, I think it's 750 feet away from our limit of disturbance. I'm confident that DEM took that and takes that into consideration when they approved this. Just like we submitted an environmental impact study showing the effect on the wetlands with a biologist and an engineering study. I think what they're asking for is a habitat assessment, which the DEM can require and will require on significant applications, which they didn't here. So, you know, in terms of, there were things talking about the updated storm data. The National Oceanic Administration, NOAA, absolutely updated your flood maps and your storm data. We used to model storms prior to 2010, but about 7.2 inches of rain. In this area, it's now 8.6. It's a dramatic increase. The term barely vested, I'm going to leave alone. In terms of consistency with the comp plan, that was a finding by this board in writing at master plan. We're still talking about consistency with the comp plan when this board decided that years ago. In terms of natural heritage, we've addressed that. In terms of cold water fishery, that's why you see all of the drainage appurtenances are infiltrating appurtenances, because the water is cooled and not going straight into a cold water fishery that supports fish land. Everything said is valid and of concern, but respectfully, it's everything that we address as designers and DEM approves as engineers. With that is where we are in terms of the law, from the environmental assessment to toxicity to updated storm data and so forth and so on. Same with the zoning ordinance. I don't understand how I have a zoning permit in my hand and I'm not in compliance with the zoning board. I think this is not the right forum for this. This is a town council action, not allowing, not allowing solar in a residential zone.
Excuse me, I'm gonna ask the attorney, do you agree with the statement he just made concerning zoning?
With respect to,
He has a zoning
he
permit.
does have a special use permit.
Okay, and he has a zoning permit, or he went before
Well,
zoning?
special use permit,
Yeah, all
yeah.
right, okay.
So-
Issued by the zoning board.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, to be clear, we have a master plan approval that states we're consistent with the comp plan. We have a zoning permit. We have a freshwater wetlands permit that did submit environmental impact study, and we have a Department of Transportation physical alteration permit. We have done everything this board has asked. We've taken 4 field walks, we had a neighborhood meeting, and you all that have followed this plan know that we've changed this plan multiple times to the best that we can. We can't make this go away. We've worked as a community, whatever it is you want in terms of landscaping, bonding, increased bond time, decommissioning. We've never said no to anything that the board wanted. And while I respect some of the comments, I can't honestly tell you that none of these haven't been vetted out and vetted out in writing and permitted. Everything that we submitted is public record. That was our landscape plan, our landscape estimate, our landscape architect is here. People can crawl through this application. I welcome it. It is what it is, it's by the book. That's why we're confident, it's by the book. We're not asking for any waivers, we're not asking for any variance.
All right, any more abutters? All right, anybody else that would like to speak? I'm gonna hold you to 2 minutes.
Okay.
Come on. And I can't see the clock, so I'm gonna, I'm gonna guess. Come on up, sir, come on up.
I think he thinks he's going.
Come on up.
Okay.
Age before you.
My name is Stanley Baker. I live at 14 Maple Road.
Say again, sir?
I live at 14 Maple Road.
And Stanley,
Baker,
Baker,
B-A-T-R.
thank you.
You solemnly swear the testimony about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. I don't have the gift like you guys have to speak because I had a stroke a couple months ago. But I love the area that I live in. And I hate to see you people ruin it. That's all I got to say.
Come on up, sir.
You solemnly swear the testimony about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Your name, please.
George Sackle, S-A-C-K-A-L. I just want to begin by saying the bell that we ring cannot be in the wrong. I moved my family to Foster about 5 years ago to bring to a small community.
Yes.
Sorry, moved my family to Foster about 5 years ago to bring them to a small community which reinforces good values such as caring for your neighbors. I volunteer a lot of my time to grow the Foster Scout program, and it teaches children respect for land and all people, reverence, kindness, cleanliness, and caring for others. It seems that destroying land and forcing my neighbors to look at a solar farm and deal with the decline of their property values, to have our children deal with the unknown future repercussions of a large-scale solar farm, is in direct contrast to my vision, and many of my neighbors' visions here. As you know, every good plan begins with a vision. I ask each one of you on the planning board, what is your vision for Foster? Is it junkyards, solar farms, and a divided community, which is what we see down Route 6? Or is it a vision that teaches our children that family, friends, and community should far supersede money? I urge you to look at the deconstruction cost of the project. because the numbers seem very low. It's gonna be very expensive 20 to 30 years from now to remove a panel that we don't know how to recycle yet. And this is a big concern. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else, please? Yes, sir.
You solemnly swear the testimony about the case should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
David White, I've been in the council for 20 years, almost 25 years now. I have a few questions, issues with the construction, the design plans. On the tree clearing, you show on your plans, I have your plans, where the LOD is going to be and what you're going to clear out in that zone. Now, it shows on your plans about 18 feet difference from the fence to the tree line, right? Does that mean you're only going to go where the LOD is, you're only going to go up to 18 feet and cut right there? So a tree that's 30 feet high, 40 feet, 50 feet high, which is only 18 feet away, when that comes dropping down in a storm, it's going to come smashing into your fence or your solar panels. I find it hard to believe. So you're going to end up pushing that LOD cut line closer to the property lines.
We can't do that with our current DEM permit.
Is it staked, it's going to be staked out there, how far you can?
DEM is very critical of us taking leeway, especially with the pushback on forest, deforestation. They're very critical on the limited disturbance and us taking too much. We had to prove to them that this was the least amount of clearing necessary. If it was more, it could have been deemed, it could have been denied. The two key words at DEM is random and unnecessary. So are we gonna clear anything just for randomness? No. Are we gonna do it unnecessarily? We had to prove that to them, and it's a hard standard to prove to get that permit.
Didn't that happen on Route 6 where they overcleared?
That is, you're asking me about what someone else did. Right, and so I'll ask you, where is, that's where that's enforcement. So if someone's driving 75 miles an hour on Route 6.
No need to.
Is it the guy that drew the plans?
I just want to put it up there for, no, I'm sorry. Thank you
No
for
need
answering.
to address somebody else's, he can talk, but I don't want you to address anybody else.
Yeah, you don't need to, I'm bringing it out there because you haven't done anything wrong yet on that, but on the project on Route 6, it was overcleared, it was cleared right out to the street, they weren't supposed to touch any of those trees right on the street, they cleared it right out to the street. Now you're driving down 6 and you see the solar field, okay, they put these little tiny shrubs, and they think it's gonna block anything. There's nothing's gonna block for another 10, 15 years, okay? And who enforced that? Anybody on the board, did anybody enforce it? Did we put a fine or penalty on them?
No, we didn't require a performance bond on that application.
We learned, I'm gonna say, we might have learned something from that.
Okay. I'll go on to my next one. Landscape, proposed landscape. Massive landscaping around the whole property, right? You got landscaping around the whole thing. Now, some of the trees that you're putting on here are tough to transplant and keep them alive. Like you talked about before, about a water buffalo or constant water, it's gonna take a lot of watering to keep those trees alive. You're gonna have some that die, there's no question. Guarantee on the work is 1 year. Now, in that 1 year, are they gonna be replaced? I just wanna put it on record that they do get replaced, and that someone doesn't not check on them 1 year later and find out that 20% of them died. Now we're stuck with all these dead trees and gaps in the open.
I'm not sure if you heard them say that they have been willing to extend that bond for the replacement to 2 years.
For 2 years. Okay, so, and they'll be replaced at that point. I just want to make.
If I can just say one more thing.
Sure.
And that's that, I think that this application, the solar installation on Route 6 was our first major one. And we, as you know, were badly badly deceived. And so this application has been aware the whole time of how we were treated in that. And I don't know if we have learned everything that we needed to know, but we sure hope we do. And we're trying very, very hard not to make those mistakes again.
Okay.
Hold on, let him finish, Joe. Go ahead.
Is that a good question?
No, one of the things you said about enforcement, I just want to make it clear that unfortunately, the planning board's ability to enforce is not, we don't have any enforcement duties. We pass a plan and we approve it, and then it's up to the zoning official in the town to make sure that all the things and conditions are followed. You know, we don't have that ability to do anything as far as enforcement, that's zoning. I mean, the zoning board of people, if somebody made a complaint, the zoning board can deal with it, but it's basically up to the zoning official to make sure that these plans, and I stated previously that I didn't want to see any construction, because what happened at the last one, that they started construction, and the zoning official didn't go out there and go over the plan first. So I stated that I'd want to see the zoning official go over before a tree is cut, and he knows exactly what they're gonna do. Because what happened there is they cut the trees, and all of a sudden they said, oh, didn't want to fall on the panels, but you can't replace a tree when it's cut. Right. So, you know, we were duped basically, but it's.
Let me follow Joe. Understand, everybody, we're an advisory board. Nobody has to follow what we say, all right? On the other hand, I can assure you, I think every member, we have one member, so 6 members have had this conversation numerous times about a full-time zoning official and a full-time planner, and the necessity for it in this community. So, and the reason we don't have those are money, but, hopefully, Helen stated, Joe stated, and I'm gonna stand, I'm sure everybody agrees, somebody on this board that suffered from that solar installation, hopefully we've learned and we intend, whether you believe this or not, to do the best we can for you.
And we appreciate all of this feedback very much, because, as we've said, we blew it big time on that previous one.
A lot of trees got cut down that.
Where-
It needs to come down.
So let's stay on this, please stay on this and address this.
Anyway, yeah.
Go ahead.
We do appreciate your feedback, because people think of things that we haven't thought of, and we're trying to get it right.
Okay, so are you done, sir?
No, I have one,
Okay.
one more. Lights on the property, are they gonna be floodlights at the solar? No floodlights, because I didn't see them on the plans.
No
Now,
bulbs.
they do have lights on the solar off of 101, right
Okay,
at the old Nike site?
I'm gonna, right now,
Uh-huh.
we've answered your question, the answer is no, you've had your 2 minutes if you don't mind. If you don't mind.
Yeah, but you, I let you.
Oh, no,
guys
you're
walk
from
into it
Foster,
too.
I'm sorry, you're from Foster, I'm mistaken.
I used to.
Thank you, keep going.
So the lights aren't there, but there are lights on the one at the old Nike site on 101, correct?
That I can speak to.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I live on Maple Rock, and from my house, I can see those bright lights at night out on the.
Let me ask, are there gonna be lights on this?
No, there's no emergency.
No lights.
No lights.
No lights that stay on at night while it's dusk out.
No lights.
Okay.
There was one of our condition earlier.
No lights.
Because
You've
the lights
asked,
are high. and
you've
they-
asked, it's been answered.
That's correct.
Right.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just to clarify, the ones on Theodore Foster are leased portions of private land.
Okay.
So the lights could be the property owners, his house is up there. I'm saying.
Really bright.
Yeah,
More than.
It is private property.
Yeah, if they don't have them, then no.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else, please? Yes, sir. State your name, be sworn in, please.
Jonathan Hayter,
Your last name again?
Hayter, Hayter.
on swear the testimony about the case should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. Can I ask the board, what is the rate of taxes that they're going to be taxed on this project?
I'm actually, believe it or not, trying to figure this out. Now I've asked, I think the answer we've gotten, I'm gonna say that, I think is incorrect. So at this time, I can't answer that question, and nobody else can.
The senator knows. The senator knows.
No.
I mean, even on.
I'm not asking him to testify, thank you. Keep going.
Glad you think I'm so smart.
I would hope it's based on what they generate on revenue, because this project is, in my estimate, will generate $100,000 a month.
I believe it's based on, the state has a mandate on how much we can tax, correct? So that, what's that? Yeah, and it's very, and believe it or not, it's very low.
It's very what?
Very low.
And what is the purpose? I've worked for a solar developer, and we did a 6-acre field, and that generated $25,000 a month.
But the state has mandated that, okay, so you've asked the question, we don't know the answer, the state has something, and I'm trying to find out exactly the answer to your question, I don't have it today.
And when they do break their proposal, when they do go beyond their cut line, where is the money gonna come for the fines? Out of their, what do you call it?
The
The bond?
The bond is just for the trees.
Okay. So where's the money? Or who's gonna enforce the fines? Who's gonna set the fines? Because they will break it.
If it's a zoning ordinance, the town enforces it.
Okay.
If it's through DEM or something else, that's another
It's
issue.
through their adjudicatory.
I can't hear you.
It's through DEM's adjudicatory division.
And the money doesn't come out of the bond? Because if the police bond, then we're left with no money at the end of the project.
DM would lien your property. It's per day.
DEM will what, yep.
DM will lien your property. They will, if they fine you, if you have a notice of intent to enforce a violation, the DEM could lien you and fine you daily.
So
If
what
it's not
happens?
with respect to this, they're not touching our bond.
So this bond would still remain in place on top of any fines we incur.
And as far as the drainage, that is all gonna be done topographically?
Yes, it was all done topographically. You mean, will any of the drainage be below ground?
No, is there going to be any pipes, or you just gonna hope that this leaches into the ponds and not into the wetlands?
It's gonna go into the ponds and then overflow into the wetlands as it does today. So it's gonna be,
Could you put that,
Yeah,
please
yeah.
put that back up?
But all of your drainage is hoped that it's gonna get into those ponds topographically, not via pipes, not via grates in the ground, and catch it before.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's enough.
Yeah, I think it will work just fine.
I'm in the construction.
I do not, okay, we will not have that, thank you. No, I'm not speaking to you, sir.
You have the topo map you could put up there, that would probably.
Yeah, sheet 5 is the
But
best.
it's up to the zoning, of the town zoning official to look at the topographical map and make sure that all the grades are perfect, so that this supposed project works as it's drawn. Because it seems to me that there's a pretty big space between this, the two ponds, and you're hoping that that water gets into one of them. I haven't been out to the site myself, so I don't know it, but I'm in the construction trade, and I do know what works on paper doesn't work in practice most of the time.
I agree.
Especially,
But, you know, that's something different.
especially when you, no offense, but
Everybody takes shots at me, I'm a politician.
Nobody's, no. Excuse me, sir, could you address us?
ground construction companies work to within an inch or two, not a quarter of an inch, not an eighth of an inch. So the nearest inch is okay with me. You know what I mean?
So anything else?
And they'll be settlement afterwards. So once you grade the lot, and you've done all your grades, that looks great. But then the thing settles, and then the lot goes to the water.
Anything else? All right.
So you can't tell me, will it be?
I can't tell you anything. I can tell you what DEM told me.
Will it be publicly noted what taxes they will be paying?
I'm gonna have that information for the final approval, trust me. I'm trying to find out the different assessments from the state, from the town, and the rest of it, okay? Right now, they're paying, I do have what's presently being paid on the property, on the land.
Yeah, on the land.
2,000 what?
964.
There you go. That's what's presently being paid on the land.
Which is pretty much nothing, considering they're gonna propose to make 100,000 a month.
So,
2,000 a year?
I did have one more question.
yeah.
I hope that the board has all their i's and t's crossed when they make a contract with this company, because a lot of these companies just want to do the project and flip it. So if the next company comes in and isn't held to a high standard, then we'll.
All right, thank you.
Just to answer your question on the taxes. I mean, as far as the electricity they produce, there is a maximum of $5,000 a megawatt by the state of Rhode Island. So for what they're producing, we get $5,000 for each megawatt they produce.
Using 10 megawatts.
So if it was 10, it would be, 10 times 5,000.
A year?
A year.
That's a drop in the bucket.
Well, sir, you gotta remember, it's only the power produced. It's not the power that they can make, it's the power that actually comes out of it.
Yeah.
And that's metering. It's not necessarily gonna be $5,000 a kilowatt.
But that's what you're
So it's
asking.
even less.
What you're asking, okay, is not in our purview, okay? You're asking, the only I can answer you with is what the taxes they're gonna pay after developing this project. Discussing how much they're gonna make and how much we're gonna lose and the rest of it, okay?
It just doesn't seem like the town is benefiting.
Talk to the state. This is, actually, no, I'm not gonna say that, but talk to the state, okay? This is state business, all right?
It is state, it is, if the state sets the tax levels, yes. But it doesn't seem like the town is going to benefit enough from this project.
You have to talk to the state.
Compared to what this company is
All
going to
right,
do.
okay, we got it. Before you speak again, I want to make sure everybody gets to speak once, okay? I will let you speak. Your question, sir. Your
Oh,
question.
no one else wants to speak?
I don't, you said you have one question.
No,
Please.
so I was just concerned again about
You
the,
need to state your name again.
I'm George Sackle, sorry. Just, maybe the board can address the concern again with the deconstruction bond. Again, I got a little confused on it last time we were talking about it, when Mr. Hader was bringing up some of the facts that he brought up. Is there a deconstruction bond, is that,
Yes.
or no, okay. And that is for, how much again?
80,000.
$80,000.
Okay, all right, so I'm gonna,
We're gonna get the stenographer a little bit
yes,
of a break.
just
It's
a
been
break,
a very long
okay?
time.
Yes, so we're just gonna, what are we gonna do?
An 8-minute break.
An 8-minute break, thank you. I know there's a word for it, but what is it?
Recess.
Recess, thank you. I told you I was old. Yes, I told you I was
Like this cold, better than it was 3 days ago. Sorry, that's why I take a shower, break the heat up, I know what we're talking about. Yeah, I know.
State, Jeff. Okay, more testimony from people from Foster. We're back in session. Yes, sir.
I just want to ask a couple of questions.
Come up, please. State your name, be sworn in.
My name's Martin Dever, D-E-V-E-R.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. I just have a question about the collection pools, like their depth and how the water gets out of it. Is it just flowing off the top, or does it seep through the ground? And I was also wondering...
Let him answer that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, no, fair question. So the initial flow is supposed to infiltrate and percolate through the ground.
Through the ground?
Yeah, that's the initial flow.
How deep are they?
4 feet. Yes, some of
How
them.
deep are they?
4 feet.
Oh, they're 4 feet.
Yeah, they were about 3 or 4 feet.
Okay.
So there is, there's initially, in some of them, and I'm just looking at number 4, so 4 feet in depth, and then there's an overflow weir. So there's a broad crested weir, which is just made out of standard concrete curbing. For this one in particular, it's about 50 feet long. And so these really aren't ponds, they're berms.
They're berms, okay.
So we're taking, we're taking as little as we have to, and we're making a berm, and so then the water can back up in that berm. And we're gonna use the natural grade as the back end of the ponds. So they're not typical basins and ponds, but they do have a depth to them. And after that first flush percolates, the rest of the pond is designed to store the rest of the water until it cascades over the broad crested weir.
I see. And then,
I'm sorry, cascades over the what?
It's called a broad crested weir.
and are they going to be exposed to the sun, or will they have some shade?
No, they'll be exposed to the
Because they're
sun.
right next to where the panels are, so you need to...
Yes, and some of the panels are in the ponds. They're in the
right,
berm
yeah.
area.
So they're providing some shade then, presumably.
Right, and it's not necessary, but some of the panels are in the pond, and one of the comments DEM had is we have to put the elevation of the water for every of the design storms, each one of the requisite design storms, you have to put the elevation, and they want to make sure that the panels are always above the 100-year flood. Even though they're watertight, and they can be submerged in water, it was a comment DEM had, and so we adjusted it. So we had at least 6 inches of freeboard in a 100-year storm event from the bottom of any panel to the top of any water in any pond.
And what would you, do you know what the surface temperature of the panels will be, say like on a regular July day?
Generally, the surface temperature of the panels is like 20 to 30 degrees above ambient temperature. So if you have like a 80-degree day, it'd be about 110, 120.
And have you guys calculated the temperature difference in the runoff water as it's like from we're in the forest as opposed to like being on a panel baking in the sun.
Yeah, we haven't calculated how the ambient temperature, what that stormwater temperature will be. What suffices for DEM and what's required is if we infiltrate it into the ground, the natural cooling of the ground before it makes its way to the wetlands.
Because it's gonna go through the ground, it's not gonna go over top.
The smaller storms will go through the ground, which will have the hotter water, and the ground, the natural soils will cool it, like, you know, the hydro systems that we have today. And then the larger storm events, it will go overland, over the, out of the detention basins.
Okay. And that's all DEM regulation, I
It's
assume?
DEM regulation. So one of the things we say, the brook is a cold water fishery.
Right.
One thing they won't allow, if this was a very large parking lot, they're not just gonna let us put that water into a detention basin and then right into the wetland. The change in temperature will affect.
I mean, I'm not a scientist, but it does seem that the pools might need to be deeper in order to drop that temperature more. Because if you do get a large rain after you've had a lot of warming, I mean, 4 feet deep is not very deep.
Yeah.
You know, if you think about like a 20-foot well in the middle of summertime, how much that temperature changes, it seems like if you get a lot of rain, that spill off is going to be a lot warmer than it was when it was a forest.
Yeah, no, it's fair, and ultimately, we're,
If I may, that, what I said was on a sunny day, not on a rainy day. On a rainy day, the temperature of the panel is gonna be ambient temperature, it's gonna be the surrounding temperature.
Right.
It's the sun that heats the panels, and the panels are very thin, so they act like heat sinks, so they don't store, they're not a big thermal mass.
Right.
They don't store a lot of heat energy. It's not a parking lot that has, you know, 4 or 5 inches of macadam that is gonna, you know, have a thermal mass associated with it.
Okay.
These are very thin
But
glass.
the ponds themselves are a thermal mass, right? Because it's gonna be holding water?
That's true, but
And they're gonna
they're,
be concrete?
but the water is gonna be coming down at a
Right, and then when the
atmospheric temperature.
temperature on the surface of the water is gonna be the hottest, right?
right, and so our plan is when we discharge from the pond, water that's not infiltrated, that goes overland, sits in the wetland, and that's that should bring the water back to the ambient temperature. And the water leaving the wetland, as the new water is coming in, the water that's leaving the wetland going into the cold water fishery, because the wetland's not the cold water fishery, the brook.
Right.
And that's why we put the detention basins next to the wetlands. Obviously, they're downgraded and it's easy to get the water into, but then discharging to the wetland is a further temperature protection. But then ultimately it gets to done.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna try and, if everybody will agree, wrap up the public testimony here, because the board still has work to do. So if there's anybody that really needs to speak again, or at all, step forward, otherwise I'd
I
like.
would. My name's Monique Taylor. I personally spoke to the DEM people, and they told me straight up, they can only issue a permit based on the wetlands that surround the project. They have no control over anything else. So, my question to you, there are several of us that already have a lot of water problems. When it floods, and it will, who do we sue? You or them?
Anybody you want. That's what a suit is, just name people and go wild. All right, could I ask you to fix that rug before you get killed?
And that would be a bad thing, right?
I don't want you falling out the door, you know, and suing us.
I heard the town had deep pockets, you got some bonding.
Yeah. My job is to protect the town. Anything else?
I just have one quick statement.
Can you say your name, please?
Donna Fontana.
Thank you.
It was asked before if there's going to be any concrete in the project, and the answer was no sonotubes. I don't know if you laid no to any concrete at all, but he just mentioned that there's going to be some type of berm, so concrete berms to filter the water. So just again, something to consider when you're considering that bond for decommissioning, another expense, getting rid of the concrete. I don't know how big they are, I don't know how much concrete, I don't know.
I'm gonna wrap up, okay?
May I ask just one question, sir? May I?
Yeah, have fun.
Please just state your name for the record.
I will.
Thank you.
Amita Rodman. I don't know in whose purview this will fall, planning or the officials in town hall, but I am concerned about the period of time of construction, which is on the upside 2 months, and maybe below budget and on time, or it could be above budget in 4 months. Route 101 is heavily trafficked at times, and I imagine that moving the timber and then whatever else has to be done to prepare the area will require some disruption, some days where you're moving trucks. How will that be managed for all of us? And it will affect Route 6.
Absolutely. Okay,
I'm asking how will that be managed? Is that in a construction plan?
that would be handled by the logger and the people who give permits to logging. This board is not going to deal with that. Okay? All right. I'm going to quote. Anything else?
Not from Foster.
At this time, I'm going to close the public comment section, and the chair will accept a motion of the application along with the required findings of fact, which is the draft motion in the affirmative. May I, correct? Am I correct? Or is it this? Oh, we have a motion.
Barry, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
can we have some discussion on the public comment before we entertain the motion?
Well, I was going to take the motion and then have a comment.
I just wanted to know if we want to make any amendments, we do it first before we make the full motion.
All right.
So I believe the applicant, oh, we closed the public hearing. The applicant did want to, he had to serve some time for other wrap up.
Okay.
No more than 30 minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Because truthfully, pretty soon, we're gonna extend this thing.
Understood, yes. So, first of all, thank you for your attention and your questions this evening. I think some of the points you've raised, and certainly some of the points that the crowd raised, are valid points. But I also like to think that throughout the course of the many hearings and public meetings that we've had, that we've addressed those. And it's important to keep in mind that we're vested at master plan. So some of the testimony today about the drainage concerns, that's already been addressed by this board. And as part of your findings at the master plan, you made a determination that this was a suitable development. To quote the decision, it was decided that there would be no negative environmental impact upon the site. So any testimony that we've heard today about environmental impact studies, that ship has sailed. We're vested with that decision. Minimizing flooding, again, the master plan decision was that the proposed use of the property was going to minimize flooding. We've heard a lot of testimony this evening about drainage concerns. We've had our experts here at every one of these hearings, and they've testified under oath, provided expert opinions that, in their opinion, they've actually reduced the runoff from the property. But we've heard a lot of testimony tonight from concerned people, and I don't want to minimize their concerns, whether that's lay testimony, and it's not to be confused with expert testimony. We've heard people questioning the validity of the zoning board decision. There's a mechanism for challenging a zoning board decision, and that's called an appeal. If you elect not to appeal a zoning board decision within 20 days after it's granted, that ship has sailed as well. And again, I don't want to minimize your points because you raised some valid points, but the fact of the matter is there's a time and a place for everything. The purpose of a preliminary plan hearing is to address any issues that were raised at the initial stages, which need to be fine-tuned, and that's what we were here for tonight. We've heard a lot of testimony that doesn't necessarily apply to that. So I'd like the board, in its considerations, to take into consideration the fact that most of the things that we've raised today were already vested on. Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'm going to take a motion, that is 10 o'clock, all right? I'm going to accept a motion to continue this hearing to our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is going to push off the 5-year road plan. But, you know, our April 3rd, is it?
Yes.
April 3rd will be the continuance. May I have a motion? May I have a second? A second, thank you. Further discussion from the board? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Thank you all for coming.
I wonder if you guys on the altar was aware that you would like something like this. Back in your yard.
You see up the state house and the good stuff.
Back in your yard.
I
wanted to go back, people, I wanted to walk and say something, but somebody said,
Somebody probably already said they were thinking.
yeah, you know, but they didn't, they knew it better than I was. You too, have a good day.
And then,
How's the boys? My son too, all that, he doesn't want to play baseball anymore.
Yeah.
Years of my life
They
on
told
that
me,
field, going.
they told me last year that I was gonna be there last halfway through.
That hurts me too, I love it.
They like the